What's up, Tyler? My red deficit tie. Means we're in the red.
Okay, good morning, folks. Welcome to the May 15th council meeting. It's a very exciting day, very important day. City Clerk, would you please call the roll? Oh, I'm sorry, I called this meeting to order at 9:09 a.m. City Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Councilmember Perea.
Here.
Councilmember Maxwell.
Present.
Councilmember Vang.
Present.
Councilmember Richardson.
Present.
Councilmember Esparza.
Present.
Vice President Arias.
Presente.
And Council President Karbasi.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. Today we will have, welcome back, Councilmember Richardson. If you, as our only veteran, would honor us with leading the Pledge of Allegiance today.
Good morning. Please stand and put your numbers. Face to your left, my right. Place your right hand over your heart. Prayer from the military. Welcome to present the military salute and salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Next, we're going to move to approval of the agenda. City Clerk, are there any changes or items removed from the agenda?
I've received no changes to the agenda.
Okay. Council members, are there any items you wish to remove from the agenda or continue? Right, there being none, I'll entertain any motions right now. Moved by Councilmember Maxwell, seconded by Vice President Arias. Any opposition? Agenda approved unanimously. Thank you very much. 7-0. Okay. Next is the budget presentation. This is the time for the mayor to shine.
Or not.
No, we're going to do great today.
Wasn't that yesterday?
As a matter of fact, it was.
Welcome, Mayor. We're looking forward to your presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, and good morning, Council, and hopefully you guys can hold off on any questions that you might have till after the presentation. It's very similar to the one I rolled out yesterday to the media, but there are some additional, there is additional information in there that will be first time. It's my honor to be able to present the FY26 proposed budget to all of you on the council this morning. And I think after many conversations that we've had over the past year, I think this budget will reflect many of the priorities that you have within your individual districts, although I know as years pass, I'm sure there's going to be some budget motions along the way. In my opinion, this budget sends a very, very strong message to our community that we will live within our means in city government, but we will also at the same time build a better future for Fresno. So the slide before you, we have for the proposed FY26 budget totals $2.36 billion. Of that, general fund accounts for $512.4 million, which is a 29.2 million dollar increase over FY25, which equates to a 6% increase. As you know, these are dollars that support services such as police and fire, which now make up 2/3 or 66.5% of our general fund budget. So 66.5% of the $512.4 million goes to police and fire. Enterprise and internal service funds make up $969.3 million. And for the benefit of the new council members, enterprise funds come from utility ratepayers that pay for solid waste, wastewater, and water services, as well as revenue that supports our fax department and our airport. The remaining $873.7 million comes from special revenue such as Measure C and Measure P, various state and federal grants, as well as capital funds. And these funds largely support the Parks and Recreation Department, street maintenance, and construction type projects, and we have plenty of them, as you'll see in your budget binder. The FY26 budget presents significant financial challenges due to ongoing expenditures exceeding actual revenues and the absence of one-time funding such as the CARES Act, American Rescue Funds, and Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And as you know, those funds were previously used to offset revenue shortfalls within our general fund and other budgets. while maintaining and, in many cases, enhancing services that we provided over the last 3 years. For example, $27.6 million in American Rescue funds were used to offset expenses in the fire and police department budgets in FY25 in lieu of reductions, and the general fund is absorbing these expenses in the FY26 budget. And you can see $17.9 million was placed into the fire budget, and $9.6 million was placed into the police department's budget. In terms of revenue, property tax makes up 40% of the general fund, while sales tax comprises about 30%, and additional 10% comes from room taxes as well as business taxes. For FY26, property tax is projected to be $202.6 million, which is up 6% from FY25. And I do want to add that property tax is our most reliable revenue source in the city. Sales tax is projected to be $143.8 million compared to our year-end estimates of $141 million in FY25. And so that is a 2.69% increase year over year. And although it is an improvement year over year, the sales tax increase is far below what is needed to be able to keep pace with current expenditures and inflation as we know it today. Business and room tax revenue are projected at $23.6 million and $16.5 million respectively, and both of those taxes are trending in a positive direction. Unfortunately, cannabis revenue, as we all know, continues to be far below what was originally anticipated. Revenues are projected to be at $3.4 million for FY26, even though we are increasing the number of retail establishments in our city by 5. Currently, we have 13. We anticipate in FY26 having 18 of those operational. You'll see the other revenues and charges. I had a conversation with Councilmember Esparza today, the $122.6 million. It's a lot of money for other revenue. That revenue category includes our carryover funds from FY25, which are unspent dollars, Prop 172 monies, which are public safety dollars, card room revenue, which is about $1 million a year, real estate transfer tax, development fees, which is a big one, fines, penalties, et cetera. So that's what makes up the $122.6 million. The budgetary challenges we face are being driven largely by rising expenses due to inflation, contractual obligations, and personnel cost. Early in FY25, we recognized that expenditures were outpacing our revenues, and as a result, we started holding monthly meetings in August, a month after the budget was adopted, and to assess our financial condition and to be able to implement strategies along the way in order to reduce those expenses. And what this included was selective hiring and ensuring department attrition rates were being met that we had established last year. In essence, we began intentionally holding more and more vacancies along the way, which helped in our carryover. During the FY25 mid-year budget presentation to you, as you recall, we identified a projected deficit of $20.6 million through the end of FY26 based on revenue and expenditure projections as we knew them at the time. This did not take into consideration a number of other factors to include unknown future cost increases at the department levels once we started doing our budget build process and meeting with department directors, as well as starting to see continued overall revenue decreases. Following the mid-year report and during the, again, FY26 budget build process, the projected increase of that funding gap grew from $20.6 million and grew substantially. In fact, it grew once we added some of the essential needs and department contractual obligations. It grew to over $50 million. And yes, Council Member Esparza, you were correct. The drivers for this widening funding gap included an unanticipated general fund obligation for a landfill capital project of $1.3 million, We can anticipate paying very close to that every single year. Also, the need to shift $1.8 million from the general fund to an enhanced infrastructure financing district. As you know, that's the EIFD for Blackstone and Downtown, which was started a few years ago. Contractual obligations and departments for software leases and equipment totaling $2 million. $2 million. Increases in employee salaries and benefits guaranteed in their MOU, as well as anticipated FY26 increases, and that totaled $17.8 million. And some of those expenses were previously accounted for in the mid-year report that we provided to you. Fire department attrition adjustments were made to overtime, which added $3.3 million to the budget gap. I'll explain it right now. At that present time, when we were doing the mid-year projections, it was factored in that every department would take the 6.18% attrition, which was not possible for fire, and I'll explain why later. The funding of certain requests by various departments deemed to be critical or essential, such as safety equipments and some of the unfunded mandates that we have from the state, this totaled $5.3 million. As part of the effort to bring the budget back into balance, every department, with the exception of the fire department, city council, is being asked to maintain a 6.18% attrition rate. In essence, holding 6% vacancy rate throughout the year, which is what we monitor. This equates to a savings of about $18.6 million in the general fund and $6.8 million in enterprise departments, for a total of about $25.4 million in attrition. Holding, as I said earlier, holding vacancies in the fire department results in overtime costs due to their constant staffing model, which really offsets any salary savings. So there is no need to do attrition because it gets spent in overtime. However, the fire department has identified $1 million in salary savings from vacancies that will not generate overtime. In addition, during the FY26 budgeting process, every department was asked to identify 5% cuts within their non-personnel line items. Remember, under the personnel side, we're already taking out attrition. And that 5% is on top of the 3% cuts that we asked nearly all departments to absorb in FY25. Not every department was able to achieve the 5% cuts without severe impacts to their department, while others were able to cut more than 5% by identifying efficiencies, and that savings of the 5% exercise that we did with departments totaled $11.5 million in savings. Revised revenue projections were also made based on historical values. For example, we went back 5 years on our property tax, saw what the average is, and that's why we came up with the just over 6% that we're factoring in for property tax increase in FY26. Wherever legally permissible, reallocation of general fund expenses were transferred to special revenue funds and grants, freeing up general fund dollars. For example, the police department, we freed up or transferred certain police officers into the retail theft unit, which is covered by a state grant. The number of vehicles in the city fleet were reduced for operational savings. These were vehicles with the highest mileage, generating higher maintenance costs. For example, in the police department, I think you know during the American Rescue Fund time, we were able to purchase a lot of patrol vehicles, and so our fleet increased substantially. We are now rotating out 88 police vehicles, and 15 of those from the Regional Training Center, which are used for the Emergency Vehicle Operation course. We're also going to hold 34 vehicles we have 15 from the police fleet. We're selling 30 of those cars that are high mileage at an auction. We've already factored in that revenue. The remaining vehicles will be kept into somewhat of a reserve fleet. And as as police vehicles go out of service for whatever reason, crashes, high maintenance, Those vehicles will then be brought in from the reserve. So we feel good about that. In addition, the ordering of certain vehicles and equipment were delayed, generating considerable savings to the general fund. Vehicles and equipment that would routinely be purchased outright are also being leased to offset any upfront cost. And then lastly, the trolley services were reduced, eliminating Thursday evening service with the exception of the first Thursday, which is Art Hop night. And this is going to actually provide a savings of $292,400. A question was asked me earlier if we're allowing folks to sponsor and place advertising on the trolley. The answer is yes. We currently have 6 of those sponsors. So as a result of all of these combined efforts and more, a balanced budget, is being provided to all of you this morning for your deliberation and future adoption. The proposed FY26 budget is not only balanced, in my opinion, it supports what I believe to be ongoing quality service by the city of Fresno, and it will fund a number of ongoing and new initiatives. And I just wanted to highlight a few of those for all of you. The FY26 budget will add 4 police officers. They will not be supported through general fund. They'll be funded by the FACS department. This will increase the number of officers assigned to the FACS department to 2 sergeants and 10 officers, and will enhance the safety of bus drivers and passengers alike. This will also bring the total number of sworn officers in the police department to 930, which is an additional 92 officers since taking office. 30 new police vehicles will be ordered in FY26 at mid-year. Therefore, a lease payment will not be needed until FY27. Again, that will complement some of the vehicles being taken out of the fleet in the police department. The first lease payment of $812,000 for the new police helicopter will take place in FY26. $1.1 million is being added to the police department in FY26 for contractual obligations for ongoing software and equipment services. This is primarily for the body-worn camera through Axon as well as data storage. 42 firefighters previously funded with a SAFER grant will be absorbed into the general fund, similar to last year. This is a $1.9 million increase into the FY26 budget. And again, that's in addition to the $5 million which was absorbed in FY25. In addition, a percentage of the 24 firefighters funded with the second SAFER grant is being absorbed into the general fund in FY26, and that is a general fund cost of $265,800. And as we know, that cost will increase over the next couple of fiscal years. The FY26 budget supports the replacement of safety equipment for firefighters, such as boots and turnout gear, that totals $300,000. Ongoing funding of $1 million is being placed in the FY26 budget at the request of many of the council members as part of the residential infill program to incentivize infill housing development. $1.5 million, again, at the request of many of you, is being budgeted in the city attorney's office to support the eviction protection program. $70,000 is being budgeted in the city attorney's office to support a software program in support of the rental housing program and will allow for increased revenue generation. $286,000 being added to the city attorney's office for additional off-site space rental. I was asked a question yesterday, why? And it's because we're growing. Growing as a city and growing in many of our departments. We added space for the capital projects last year, and we're adding space for the 188 employees in the city attorney's office. $300,000 is being budgeted for the Marjorie Mason Center to support their domestic violence crisis response team, which is ongoing. These funds will allow for a 24/7 crisis helpline, victim navigators and victim advocates to remain in place, And also other jurisdictions throughout Fresno, law enforcement jurisdictions, are being asked to support that program financially as well. The FY26 budget supports a planting of 1,000 new trees under Councilmember Maxwell's 1,000 trees per year initiative. This comes at a cost of about $950,000 non-general fund. It comes from special revenue. $2.8 million is also budgeted for proactive tree trimming. I think you know, a few years ago, council made the decision we were going to go to a 10-year cycle. Unfortunately, with inflation, $2.8 million will put us at a 12-year tree trimming cycle in our city. Funding from the Facts Department is included in the FY26 budget to initiate the process for shade structures to be placed at every Facts bus stop in the city of Fresno. The planning will take place this year. I'm not sure in terms of the implementation. It could be towards the latter part of FY26. This budget supports our ongoing beautification efforts in our neighborhoods, business districts, and freeways by continuing to fund the quad teams, which have been extremely successful, graffiti teams, and litter abatement teams. I think you know those teams are cleaning up about 375,000 pounds of trash per month in the city of Fresno. With nearly $900 million allocated to more than 440 public works and capital improvement projects citywide, the FY26 budget represents an unprecedented season of growth and development in Fresno thanks to special revenue sources. And these investments span areas such as parks, public safety, infrastructure, and housing. And all of you can look into, there's a comprehensive listing of these city projects included in the capital summary of the FY26 budget. And this includes the Dolores Huerta Park, a 49-acre park at Butler and Peach, which is yet to be named. And it also includes, let me get to it, the new Les Kimber Park in southwest Fresno, the Willow and Balch Tot Lot, and the BMX track at Woodward Park, just to name a few. And you'll see in the budget book, there's actually, I think, 558 capital projects. The 440 are those with at $50,000 or more. In addition, Fresno's credit rating has reached its highest level in our history, reflecting strong financial management and economic diversification. This means we are able to borrow money at a much lower interest rate, which is why it is a perfect time to build and invest in long-term capital projects, and I believe all of you agree on the council. And we have three major bonding opportunities ahead of us, although there are probably more that we will identify along the way. But bonding and construction of a new 911 communications center. Construction will begin in FY26 at a cost of $19.2 million. $16.9 million is planned to be financed, and annual debt service, although it could change based on rates, at $1.3 million. Half of that will be paid with police impact fees from development, and half of that from the general fund. Second, bonding and construction of Fire Station 12. This council is already doing a resolution of reimbursement for that. Construction will begin in FY26 at a total cost of $19.5 million, very similar to the communications center. $18 million will be financed with annual debt service of approximately $1.4 million. Again, half of that annual debt service will come from fire impact fees from new development. Half of it will come from the general fund. And the big one that I've talked to all of you about, and hopefully you all continue to support this, a $100 million bond will be pursued as part of the FY26 budget process to support the Pave More Now, Pay Later initiative. This will allow for the repaving of neighborhood streets in all 7 council districts. This will go a long way to chip away at the city's $1.2 million, $1.2 billion in diverge street maintenance and reduce the demand on our pothole elimination team. And I know all of you have been working with our Public Works Department, capital projects, to identify those streets within your individual districts. And simply put, for the public, the longer we wait, the more expensive it gets. When you consider the inflationary costs that are occurring, and you look at what road degradation is doing to the increasing cost of repaving those streets, so it costs more next year than it does this year. And so the faster we can bond and the faster we can start working, the more work we're going to get done, and we will be able to pay more now and pay later. When I say pay later, the repayment of these bonds would begin in June of 2029. So there'd be no impact in this fiscal or the next couple of fiscal years. And the reason we coincided with that is that's the time, June of 29, when the debt from the city's pension obligation bonds rolls off. And that's a savings of about $12.8 million annually. So that is the perfect time to bond. In addition, 300,000, I didn't share this yesterday, but in addition, 300,000 per city council district is being funded within the Public Works Department for a total of $2.1 million. These funds are being used at the discretion of council members for district infrastructure projects such as fixing sidewalks. City council infrastructure budgets for FY25 that are yet to be spent, projected at $2.4 million at the time of this budget, will be carried over into the FY26 budget for future projects as identified by the council. Each council district is also being funded, budgeted for operational expenses at $875,000, with the support budget, also known as the 8th district, being fully funded at $736,600. And that covers a total of 53 positions, 3 in the 8th district or support budget, and the other 50 through the 7 council districts. Any unspent operational money within your current budgets will be carried over into FY26. I do want to pause for a second because I know last year we had set aside $400,000 per district, $2.8 million for your infrastructure and public works. A motion was made to take $100,000 out and put it into your operational budget. That's the budget we built this year based on the action you did last year. So you have $300,000 in infrastructure, but we increased your operational budgets by $100,000 and an additional $25,000 and another $25,000 in each district for intern. So each of you have the $875,000. In closing, there's no question that we are facing challenging fiscal times and uncertainty as a city as to the future funding opportunities from the state and the federal government. And this is clearly the case with the fact that the $200 million that has been deferred for our downtown infrastructure was not provided in the governor's May revise yesterday. And there is a potential for, as we all know, elimination of federal grant dollars such as home and CDBG, which we heavily rely upon. In fact, this council made a decision to move forward, as I did, with the developing of the senior center based on a 108 loan from CDBG, and that was a 20-year loan that would allow for us to pay that loan back somewhere around $2 million a year out of our CDBG annual allocation. So those funds are desperately needed by us, which is why we need to fight hard at the federal government and let them know the importance of CDBG funds, as well as the home dollars that we need desperately for housing in Fresno. And we will continue to fight fight for those dollars. And so having said that, as such, it is absolutely imperative that we as a city monitor our spending closely, constantly look for increased operational efficiencies, and explore opportunities to generate new revenues. I know that all of you on this dais, as well as myself and my administration, and our department directors are committed to doing just that. So I just want to close by saying a special thank you to all of my staff. And I want to begin with our new budget director, Ed Chinabir. He has done, I want to tell you, this is his first budget year. Incredible, remarkable. The guy is a walking computer when it comes to what we're doing. And so, Ed, thank you You kept us on pace, kept us on track during all of the meetings. We went through hundreds and hundreds of line items in the departments to identify the 5% cuts, and Ed helped us along tracking all of that. And I think this year we moved the budget office under Santino Denisi in finance. We saved about an extra $370,000 by doing that through operational efficiencies. And they report to Ruthie Quinto, who has an incredible amount of experience, obviously, as a former controller in our city. Ruthie's done a remarkable job. Ruthie is our assistant city manager. Thank you. As well as our two assistant city managers here, TJ Miller and Nick Macias. They have been in every one of our budget meetings, helping us come up with operational efficiencies, new revenue sources, and keeping us on pace with our 6.18% vacancy rate. Thank you, TJ, for that. And our city manager, Georgianne White, who has kept everybody in line during this whole process. And I appreciate Georgianne very, very much. And lastly, I want to say thank you to all of our staff and to our department directors, not only for their willingness to come forth and identify the budget reductions last year and this year, and their willingness to accept the attrition rates, but their innovation and creativity and being able to increase their operational efficiencies, and for the work that they do every day in making sure that the vision we have for this city is carried out with the fundings that we provide collectively. So with that, I'll open up any questions you might have and look forward to budget presentations in the future. City Manager, want to say a few words?
Mayor, you forgot one very important person, your Chief of Staff, Kelly Furtado.
Oh my gosh, I will pay for that. No, I won't.
We don't have the money.
No, I won't. I think you all know. Thank you, Georgianne. Kelly Furtado is one of a kind. She's a perfectionist, keeps me on target, does much of the work, almost all of the work, quite frankly, on budget, the budget letter that is provided to all of you, which I then utilize to do the budget presentation. But she's been incredible. And I will tell you, we've had to do the state of the city, the state of downtown, then the state of the city and all the preparation with that, and then now to do the budget presentation. It couldn't be possible without her. As well as, where did Fabiola go? There you are. Thank you for everything you've done, putting together the PowerPoints, the slide. Carmen, thank you very, very much, and our communication teams. So thank you, Georgianne.
You're welcome. One more cleanup. Jen Rees, my deputy city manager, also very involved in this year's budget process. And I do want to call out the budget staff by name. I know the mayor mentioned Santino and Ed directly, but I also want to call out the team by name: Pedro Rivera, Erlyn Neri, Nigma Shook, Ellie Rubio, Donnie Acampo, Danielle Valenzuela, and Elise Munoz. Thank you all very much. It's been a lot of work, and we appreciate all your efforts. So with that, Council President.
Thank you very much. I'll reserve my comments for later on. Good job, Mayor.
Thank you.
But first council member punched up is Councilmember Maxwell.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
I've already had the opportunity to ask you a couple questions. I'll probably reserve most of my questions and comments for the actual budget hearings, but wanted to start off by just commending you, presenting a balanced budget. I know that's never an easy task. We came in at a very different time 4.5 years ago when we were flush with a lot more state and federal dollars and didn't have to make so many tough decisions. I want to thank you for including a lot of the council priorities in here. Eviction protection program, I know this is the first time it's being proposed in the budget, and I think that sends a strong message to the community of the reflection of the values of the city, as well as some of the other priorities. You mentioned the 1,000 trees and a lot of other things in there too. Just wanted to commend you for that. Want to commend all the department directors for the difficult exercises, the attrition rates that are built in, the 5% reductions that most of our departments had to do. I know that's not easy, but this council acknowledges that and appreciates all the hard work from our departments. Ahead of budget, I do want to request a few documents to inform some of my decision making. But before I request those, I mean, you are probably the individual in here privy to the most information. Given all the political realities and the financial realities, how do you predict our city's budget looks a year from now? You see things getting better or staying the same or worse?
It's gotten better from what we had presented to the mid-year, only because of the fact that we've made all of these cuts. And I think for FY27, if I'm not mistaken, Ruthie, At one point, when we came in for the mid-year, although we didn't say it, we were looking at a $66 million shortfall at that time for FY '27. We've been able to scale back as a result of the cuts we've made this year and those cuts ongoing. And we are looking maybe at around 30 million for FY '27. So, and it will depend on what happens on revenue. You know, our sales tax needs to grow by more than 2.69% per year. And I'm hopeful that property tax will continue to grow at the 6% rate. That's helpful. But it will require us to grow as a city, to open up more opportunities for market rate housing, and that market rate housing is what supports our property tax revenue, which again is 40% of our overall revenue. So it's going to be a tough FY '27. There's no question in my mind. And we will continue to meet monthly in our administration to monitor the vacancy rates and to make sure that we not only have a balanced budget this year at the end of the year, or in FY '26, but that we have whatever carryover we need to offset any shortfall in FY '27. Yeah. That's the goal.
I appreciate that. I'm hopeful for a lot of those things too, but I think as we've seen the last couple of years, sales tax is not where it needs to be. Hotel tax is not where it needs to be. Business license tax is not where it needs to be. Everything except property tax, it would seem, is where it needs to be to keep us afloat. Yeah. So while I'm hopeful, I'm cautiously optimistic, I suppose. And so even while I appreciate all the exercises that our departments have done with the built-in attrition and the cost cuttings up to 5% across several departments, I think we need to get more innovative when it comes to long-term solutions, some austerity measures, because I don't plan on being part of a council that has to make personnel cuts. I really don't want that to ever have to be the case. And so I'd like to request some information to inform some of my decision-making as we go into the next month. And I don't know how much of this the administration has handy or how much of it needs to be curated, but I would like to have a master list of all parcels, all property owned by the city of Fresno, and if they have an assessed value, I would like to know what those values are.
Properties that we own as a city.
Correct.
What the values are of those.
If we have those assessed.
Okay.
But I'd like a list of the property owned by the city of Fresno. What are our assets?
Got it.
And if we know what they're worth, I'd like to know that amount as well.
Got it.
I'd like to know all the property that's been purchased with Measure P dollars that are yet to be developed.
Okay.
New parks. In a similar vein, I'd like a master list of all properties that the city leases. How much are they costing us? What's the square foot? How many people are working inside and what departments those are.
Okay.
And then I'd also like to formally request from the administration a workshop, probably not going to be the next council meeting, but perhaps the one after that, related to bonding. We've had a lot of conversations about bonding, but I am a more visual person. I think it would help for me to see all this information broken down. What are all of our current obligations? How much general fund goes towards that every year? I want to include the 911 center. I want to include the dispatch station as well in that, since we're moving forward on those.
And bonding capacity.
And our bonding capacity. I want to know all the things we're bonding for. What are we bonding against? When does it roll off? How much are we paying? How much of it is interest? I'd like to know all that information.
Okay.
And I think it'd be helpful to have that in a workshop format as well.
Okay.
The other documents you could provide just as documents would be fine. But that's really it for now, Mayor. I look forward to a lot of lively discussions coming up the next month. I appreciate all the work, and again, including these priorities that council has fought for. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And one thing I forgot to mention is there were positions added in this year's budget in FY '26. We added 41 positions. I may have said 44 yesterday, but 41 positions, none of them general fund supported. So all of them are either through the Department of Public Utilities, the 4 fax officers, so 41 added, but none of them with a general fund impact. And also, I neglected to say that this budget, there were no layoffs, and so that's a good thing for our workers.
I agree 100%, and I'd like to keep it that way moving forward too. So I'm just trying to get creative because there's only so many times that we could add attrition or ask for a 5% reduction in budget.
That's right.
Before we got to start making hard decisions, which I don't think anybody up here wants to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Esparza.
Mayor, you know how hard it is for me to say this to the administration, but great job.
Thank you.
Just good job to you and the team.
If I had a microphone, I'd drop it right now.
So hard to say it, but you all did a great job.
Thank you.
I as predicted, we went from 20 to 50, and it got worse before it got better, but you brought it back down. What I'm looking for, I suspect I know the answer. What I'm looking for is the gut punch. I mean, where are residents really going to feel the effects in terms of level of service?
Well, anytime you're holding vacancies, whether intentional or unintentional, there's a potential for service level reductions. The 6.18% attrition, which is what's generating a lot of our savings, 25 million citywide, really is natural attrition. For example, the police department, right now I think there are probably 860 officers that are with filled positions, even though they're authorized at 926. And that number will fluctuate as academies, graduate. But we have not given any direction to them to say, slow down hiring, stop hiring. So I don't see any impact in terms of public safety. I don't know about the other departments, but I don't believe so. I'll let the city manager speak. I will just tell you this. There were some departments that came in with 5% cuts, and I said, I can't live with that. So we'll take 3%. Because we're not going to reduce services like that in our community. And so, but Councilmember Maxwell's right. I think we've gotten to the point where we have cut to the bone before we start seeing service impacts out there, severe service impacts. City Manager?
Yeah, I think you're right on, Mayor. I think that the impact to residents, I don't think they're going to really feel a whole lot. Can't say that for next year. But I think on service impacts, I think it's going to be just a smidge. And I think what they're really going to not notice the change is the sheer volume of capital projects. It's not going to look like we're hurting for money because we have so many projects that are going to be coming online that have been funded in past years. So we're going to be doing groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings all throughout this next fiscal year that the residents aren't going to realize those were funded 2 years ago or last year. But I think it's going to be minimal, hiring, right, ebbs and flows. We haven't slowed down on hiring in PD, but, at times we're watching PD very, very closely for service levels.
Yeah, that's about how I interpret this budget. It's, that's exactly where my mind was. Just residents generally, people everywhere, right? We're experiencing what's happening here in our city government is the same thing that's happening everywhere, at the household level, the business level. And so I interpret this budget as sort of just another version of sort of skimflation, right, that people are experiencing, right? They open the bag of Doritos and there's a few less, right? You're maybe a little annoyed by it, but you got by. You ate your Doritos, right?
I look at it as to maybe we won't have service level reductions or severe impacts, but it's still not the level of service I would like to provide to our community, especially in the police department with quality of life type issues. So I don't think, we're just not able to reach those types of service levels that we would like to, but we're not going to see service reductions from
that was the case even when we had more money. I mean, it's always been the case. We've always had our issues with revenue. But it's clear looking at our projected budgets, this last fiscal year, this current fiscal year, into the future, it's the cost side really that's eating us up. And that's on top. That's compounded by the revenue, sort of structural revenue issues that we've always had. So, we'll continue to work together to find new ways to build, to trigger economic growth here in the city. I know we hired our new economic development director, right? We'll work closely together, our partners at EDC. That's my focus, is just continue finding ways to mitigate the impacts that we're facing here in the future. in the bad times, and obviously, have it, rolling in even more during the good times whenever those come back, whenever those may roll in. I don't have any really specific questions. I just wanted you to kind of reiterate to the public, right, that level of service really is, it's going to be relatively minimal impact. I think we'll feel it a little bit, but it's really, and I say great job because I think it'll be, very mitigated when I see. So I'll look forward to reading the binders that you left on my door this morning. We got a couple weeks to filter through those, but at first glance, great job.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And we intentionally delayed giving you the binders till this morning so you wouldn't have time to review it.
Well,
you know better than that. You do have
that's
2.5 weeks before our first, I think, department hearing.
That's textbook administration. But and as we discussed, we've got, another $7 or $8 million, I think, up the sleeve. We can pull out of the rabbit hat here for some infrastructure stuff. So we'll be sharing that soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. I had a request from Councilmember Maxwell for a follow-up.
Sorry,
Sure.
I forgot to request one thing. Under the revenue sources, other revenue and charges, could you give me a line item of that?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll get it to you today. I have it right.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. Next up to speak is Councilmember Perea.
All right, Mayor. I'll echo some of their compliments, which is this budget does contain a lot of our previous requests, our items that we have previously championed, and so, but that doesn't include everything, and so we did have to make some tough cuts, and it looks like perhaps $1 million for facade improvement didn't make it into this budget, and so there are definitely some pretty difficult give or takes, but I think the bottom line is we are going to do everything possible to ensure we maintain the same level of service, if not better. I want to touch a little bit on tax sharing, the tax sharing agreement. So you mentioned that our property tax is on the incline, and I'm happy to report that we were able to negotiate an even higher property tax split, and so we're hoping to see that number continue to rise as we're annexing more land into our city limits. Thanks to a partnership with Councilmember Maxwell and Council President Carbasi and Supervisors Pacheco and Mendez, we were able to achieve that. And the other portion of that is an adjustment to our sales tax. So we were able to negotiate that down to, I think it was a 5% adjustment.
It was, I think, increased revenue, almost 500,000,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, to our budget this year.
Correct.
$500,000 increase in revenue to our
Per
budget
year.
as a result of that.
Per year. So this was just a creative way to increase more money into our coffers without raising taxes on folks. And so, again, kudos to my teammates for helping us push that past the finish line. Just a few general thoughts, and I'll get to this when the departments are making their presentations, but bicycle cops are a really important thing for my district, and so I'm going to make sure that moving forward, we keep those fully funded.
Well, we sold all the cars, so you have more bicycle patrols.
Let's put everyone on
kidding.
bikes. And then we are still looking to see what's happening at the federal and state level and just how that is going to impact the critical programs that are potentially going to be defunded here in the Central Valley. And so I appreciate you carrying over that $300,000 that we did set aside in the last budget for the Marjorie Mason Center. I want to see if we can get creative and see if we could set aside some money for the Black Prosperity and Wellness Center as well, specifically to see what we could do to support their Black doula network. This is a organization and program that's really near and dear to my heart. And so as we're looking under every couch cushion for pennies, I know it's impossible to fill budget gaps right now in a lot of our nonprofits, but I will be looking to see if that is an opportunity that we can take leadership on and find some additional resources there. And then I just wrote a little something that I want to read out to the employees here and to anyone watching on Zoom. As we begin the process of shaping the city's next budget, we're reminded of the delicate balance we must strike between fiscal responsibility, and the promise we make to the people we represent and those who make this city work. Yes, we have to live within our means. That's not just a budgetary principle. It's a reflection of the trust our residents place in us to be good stewards of the tax dollars. But living within our means does not mean cutting essential services or turning our backs on the employees who deliver them. Too often, budget conversations revolve around projects. What's getting built, what's getting funded, what ribbon we're cutting next. And while completing projects is important, we must not forget the people who make these projects possible. The city workers who keep our streets safe, clean, running, who repair water lines, pick up trash, patrol our neighborhoods, maintain our parks, and support our families through public services. They are our most valuable investment. They are the ones that make the magic happen behind the scenes. So this budget season, let's not pit fiscal responsibility against fairness. Let's recognize that true responsibility includes honoring our commitments to the people we're elected to represent and for those who serve the city day in and day out. Let's prioritize not just the completion of projects, but the people behind them. That means hard conversations, careful planning, and yes, many, many tough choices. But it also means choosing wisely, investing in retention, investing in fair wages, investing in the long-term health of our workforce and our city. And then on a more personal note, in full transparency, I've always been very open and transparent with my personal journey of motherhood, and I do have twins along the way. They are due early July, and the goal is to get through budget, and I've asked them to at least let me get through June 17th. But there is always a possibility that they will come early, especially with twins.
Yep.
So I'm going to work really hard to be here through the whole process, but if you see my seat empty on a day or two, it could be because I'm a little busy doing some other things. But again, Mayor, thank you to you and your team. I appreciated the kudos to Ed. Ed, congratulations. This is you really hit the ground running. You've all made us really proud, and looking forward to the continued discussions. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember, and congratulations to you on your upcoming twins. And in terms of the facade improvement program, you're right. 2 years ago, we were able to fund $1 million citywide and then $1 million for the airport and the tower. And then last year, we were only able to fund $400,000, and it was restricted to Chinatown and downtown for actually this current fiscal, but not able to include it in this budget. We were just too tight. So thank you for mentioning that. And I said it yesterday, and I should probably say it here today. We did factor in employee pay raises into this budget build. We're just not saying how much publicly, right? So, okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Mayor. Next, we have Council Vice President Arias.
Thank you, Mayor. My council colleagues have asked me not to raise your blood pressure this morning.
Thank you.
So I'm going to keep my questions short, but pointed. To our budget director, some constructive feedback. This is the latest in my tenure we received the budget binder ever.
Not true.
So,
Ring the bell.
never gotten it this morning. So
Ring the bell. You have
It's
2.5
the
weeks. You
earliest.
used to get
It's
it
the
1 week in
earliest.
advance. This is the
It's-
earliest you've gotten it.
Mayor, you had your press conference yesterday. We usually get the budget binder when you have your press conference. So we got it the day
Not
after.
true.
So
Ring the bell again.
all that to say that when we make requests for information, don't be surprised if we're giving you the request the night before for the next morning's discussion, because we're working off the timeline that you guys have
Well,
set.
let me just tell you, if that's retaliatory, Miguel,
No. it's
then
not
our staff will
retaliatory.
get it to you when they get it done.
They'll give it to us, and that's what I expect.
So don't make threats from the dais, all right?
What I'm
Because we're
saying,
not going to
Mayor,
tolerate them.
What I'm saying, Mayor, is when we ask for information, we're asking for it based on when we get information.
I've given you this budget 2.5 weeks in advance, the earliest we've ever given it to this council. And it's not changed since last year. So
Mayor, let me
you
just
got
point
the
this out.
budget in advance,
Let me just point
2.5
this out.
weeks.
you had a press conference yesterday. We were asked by the press about the budget. We did not comment because we had not seen the presentation.
Same with last year and the year
Understood.
before, Miguel.
We got the budget this morning when we came in the office. We usually get the budget binders when you go public with the budget. That has been the practice since I've been here.
Yeah.
I'm simply pointing out that we got the binders after your press conference, so we were not in a position. That's why we did not comment to the press about the budget presentation.
Well, then it
So-
worked out.
Okay? Yes, it did for you. Speaking of which, a couple of questions I do have on your budget. I do want to put on the record some requests for information as we deliberate this budget. City Manager, can you provide us the last 5 years of the vacancy rates for the police department and fire department, including what the current vacancy rate is for both of those departments, as well as their overtime expenditures for each of the last 5 years, including where we're at to date,
And including general fund expenditures, is that what you said?
including what we are to date?
Okay, I can't.
Does that
I
make
didn't hear
sense?
you. Okay, yeah.
So what I'm trying to get clear on is what is the average vacancy rate for police and fire, what has been the average for the last 5 years, and what is the current vacancy rate for police and fire? That makes sense? Whether it's general fund or not, I just want to get an idea. I also would like the information on cannabis. Can we get a memo on where we are with all the licenses that have been awarded? I know there's been reference to how much revenue has been generated in this budget, but I'd like to know where we're at. I think we awarded 21 licenses, how many are operational, what do we expect the rest of them to come online for? That would be helpful for the upcoming budget discussion.
13 are operational, 5 more will come online this year. We'll give you a memo in terms of how that
Okay,
happens.
perfect. Thank you. Also, in terms of housing, there was no reference to a presentation around the housing. Can we get a memo on how much housing funds we have, on those that, the funds that have been already allocated to projects, and those that have yet to be allocated?
Good.
That would be helpful.
Based on what we know today, or based on historical perspective of what we've received year to year?
I think what would be helpful is giving us what we've received and what we have cash on hand, because we don't know what's going to come to fruition. The city manager, I don't see the tab for Chachansey Park and the agreement there, revenue or expenses. Did the tabs change the historic format?
It's
Or am I
usually
missing it?
Convention Center and Stadium after City Clerk.
Is the Chachansey Stadium within the tab of Convention Center?
Convention Center and Stadium.
Okay, perfect.
It's the same as always.
Okay, thank you. Revenue, on the other one, I want to give you also, Mayor, a preview of some of the areas I'm going to focus on for this upcoming budget. One is on the police department. I understand you're proposing an additional 4 officers coming from FACTS.
Correct. That was at a request of FACTS.
All right. Can we get from FACTS the last 5 years of incidents as it relates to safety matters and the current rate of incidents as it relates to, and then secondly, what is the funding source? Is it Measure C funding these officers, or is it federal funds funding an officer? What funds these officers?
When you say incidents, are you talking about incidents where bus drivers are assaulted, passengers are assaulted, traffic collisions involving buses?
I would leave it up to you guys to
Okay.
define that.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get an idea of the
As to
rationale and justification.
why
for-
they've asked for 4 additional officers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I remember back in the day, they used to have 14 officers at one point, FACTS did.
The high number was 2 sergeants and 18 officers when the BRT was established, but traditionally it's been 2 and 12, 2 sergeants, 12 officers, but that number was cut back when we started having a decline in hiring.
Yeah, and where I'm going on this is I haven't heard any complaints from riders. I haven't heard complaints from employees. It seems like that balance of you guys, when you guys reduce the amount of officers, charged to FACTS, was a good balance. So why are we going back and charging more officers to FACTS?
Yeah, and I think the answer to that part of it is that we've been utilizing contract law enforcement officers to fill those positions for facts. This is converting the dollars that were being previously used for contract law enforcement to permanent so that we have more consistency in terms of who's working on that facts route. And so that's part of it. Money's being shifted from contract law enforcement over to permanent salaries.
But you are increasing the amount of permanent employees charged.
Correct.
Right? Okay. On the budget, just generally speaking, Mayor, the budget comes down to revenues versus expenditures.
That's right.
What I've been hearing in the public conversation is revenues are not where they need to be, revenues are flat, or they might be slightly growing, but expenditures are outpacing revenues, in a sense. But in the budget, I'm seeing more employees being added to the budget. Yes, not all of them are general fund, but more employees still cost some general fund operations dollars, from IT to a whole bunch of little things. So I'm struggling with...
None in IT, by the way.
None in IT?
No.
But I'm struggling with this notion that we're telling the public that revenues are down or flat, and we have this, it was a $20 million deficit turned to a $50 million deficit.
Sure.
The messaging is unclear on if we're in such dire financial situation, why are we adding more employees to expenses?
Let me just address that real quick, because it is a valid concern. So 41 people being added, 4 of those are police officers. That leaves the other 37 throughout the city. But I also shared with you that we have 558 improvement projects that are going on in the city based on prior revenue that we got either from the American Rescue Funds, Measure C, SB1, whatever the case is. Those dollars that we have now, so 440 projects that we have that are over $50,000, 900 projects, those have to be carried out by our employees. If we do not have the necessary people in place to carry those out, we won't be able to get those projects done. But they're funded outside of our general fund. And so that is a message we want to convey. There's a reason. It's through special revenue.
So is it fair to say that once those projects are completed, those employees go away, and that liability goes away financially?
Or we have, through attrition, that could happen, or you generate more revenue like we would with the $100 million Pave Now program. That will necessitate them being utilized for that. So the goal is to have outside funding sources pay for any additional employees. But general fund, this is the first year, I believe, that we have not added a general fund employee. And in fact, we're holding a higher vacancy rate of those general fund employees.
So speaking of holding positions, usually in budget lingo, and Ruthie can correct me if I'm wrong, we've been used to and trained to think in the form of a hiring freeze. You're suggesting you're not engaging in a hiring freeze yet. You're just basically holding vacancies open.
Selective hiring.
Is that the same thing?
Yeah, selective hiring, delayed hiring. The 6.18% is about the average that we've experienced as a city in terms of vacancy rates. So we felt comfortable with that. You'll remember a couple of years ago, I took the move of saying, well, let's do 10%. Well, what we ended up with is we didn't achieve 10%, and we couldn't achieve 10%. So we ended up at 6.18, which is about our average. That's a natural attrition. However, there are certain times during the course of the year when there's a request for a position to be added that we don't believe is needed at that particular time, or maybe not needed at all. And TJ Miller looks through every single one of those, what do they, Form 3 requests, or what do they call them? And then we make a decision, should we move forward with them? Is something needed now? So there is some intentional holding of vacancies, but it's very selective based on need.
And if I could add, Mayor.
And across the board.
When you use terms like hiring freeze, that has a little bit of a chilling effect. There are positions like in PD and fire that we are constantly recruiting for, engineers. And when you send a message that there's a hiring freeze, that word gets out and our applicant pool goes down. So that's why we have just been very, very intentional on our hiring. Where we need positions, we're hiring. Where we need to slow down on hiring, we're doing that. We're being very intentional. And so I know that everybody wants to label it a hire freeze, but that sort of has chilling effect out in the recruitment world, and that's why we don't want to go there with those
Is it fair to
terms.
describe it that a hiring freeze is across the board versus what you're doing?
We do not have a hiring freeze.
No, I know you don't. What I'm asking is it fair to describe a hiring freeze is usually defined as across the board, you're
Yes,
not hiring?
I think that's fair.
And that's not what we're doing.
Correct.
We are just selecting what departments we're not going to.
And that have the revenue to support those positions. That, for instance, where it makes sense that if we're paying overtime, it's more expensive than hiring another person. We are going through those request by request to make the best decision possible.
Thanks for the clarification. Can we get a list of the departments that you guys have intentionally implemented this strategy for
Sure.
and the positions?
It's yes.
It'd be,
sure.
I mean, we can, but it'd be a challenge to go back because some of them were like maybe delayed 2 months.
I'm not interested, Mayor, in what happened in the past. I'm interested in where you
going
plan
forward.
to intentionally implement the strategy going forward.
Yeah, and those, okay.
Right.
They change, and I'll give you an example. A department will come in and say, here's our attrition vacancy, and here's the positions identified. And then what we tell them is, hey, if you find the need to hire the person for this position, and you want to hold it over here, you can do that during the course of the year, but we want to leave that based on what their operational needs are. So it's difficult to say this position under this PCN is being held vacant all year, because it may change.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to get ahead of is complaints that we're going to hear when we ask for a building, how come a building has not been awarded, a business has not been awarded their business permit.
Gotcha.
Somebody's going to tell us, well, a fire inspector, the city manager is holding the fire inspector position vacant, therefore we can't do
Right.
the inspection. Where we fund the construction of a sidewalk, then Public Work tells us, well, that person isn't available because it's being held. I just want to get a preview of what areas you guys are going to hold so we can have the expectation of where services may not be as efficient or as fast as previously.
Understood.
The conversation around labor, I know we're not going to get into specifics, labor, but we are in negotiations with all labor groups at this point.
Well, we haven't, all of them will have open contracts,
Okay.
which is what, 12? That we have 12 open labor contracts? Yes.
So, Mayor, based on your assessment, is it fair to say that there's funding, I know you mentioned there's funding in the budget for some adjustments, but would it be fair to say that there isn't money in the budget for a significant adjustment across the board?
I would say the funding that has been placed in the budget allows for good faith bargaining on the part of the city, that we can meet the needs that we believe are met. It doesn't mean that we'll be able to meet the expectations of the bargaining units in terms of what their demands might be or requests.
That's fair. And I do, at one of the previous meetings, some of the bargaining units suggested that we go to the taxpayers and we, push a sales tax increase to be able to afford higher wages. I want to be crystal clear. Based on this budget, that it clearly demonstrates that we're living within our means, that we're not cutting services to residents across the board, that we're still able to take care of our obligations to our labor partners and make some, additional adjustments. So I don't think there's any foundation for us to go and ask residents who are already living with inflation to tax themselves even more for the benefit of a handful of interest groups. So I want to be clear, if we start this conversation about a local tax, I don't see the rationale in this budget proposal for such a move, and I would publicly and wholeheartedly oppose it. I do have a question for you, Mayor, on the delta of tree trimming. You've indicated this council approved a 10-year cycle. Inflation has kicked in, so now it looks like a 12-year cycle. What is the delta of keeping it a 10-year cycle per last approval?
In order to go from 12 to 10, it's an additional $700,000.
Oh, that much just to keep it a 10-year cycle?
Yeah, so you figure over the last 2 years, inflation has ate up that $700,000.
And the funding source for tree trimming is what?
It's special, where's Scott Mosier? Special revenue, which one? Okay, general fund on that one.
There's no Measure C dollars, Measure P dollars going to tree trimming?
Scott, come on up here.
I don't want to go too deep, Scott. Never mind, Scott. I'll save
So,
those questions for
yeah,
that
for the
portion.
purpose of this conversation, it's a general fund. And in fact, when we added, as you remember, 4 years ago, we had no proactive tree trimming.
Yeah.
We added $2.8 million. It was all general fund. And so that number has been eaten away at through inflation.
Okay. My last couple of previews for you, Mayor. I'm going to be looking deeply at the parks operational department's activities, primarily around their use of community centers. I've been doing site visits of community centers. Measure P was approved a few years ago. The expectation is that there'd be a lot more youth activity programs, things of that nature. You've noted just about every department in this building has new office space, given the significant amount of employees that we've added. Parks Department has defaulted office space to youth community centers, and I think it's at the detriment of youth services that could be operating there, so I'll just be looking deeper into that space. I do believe that we have the 2 former Fresno B buildings that could be used for Parks Departments to have their office space and free up community center space for community. The other areas I'll be looking at, Mayor, is the Visitors Bureau, our partnership with the Visitors Bureau. As you noted, they're supposed to be, they take some of our TOT tax, our hotel motel tax. In theory, they're supposed to be recruiting huge conventions to use Sound Arena and the convention center and fill hotel rooms. In practicality, I've looked through their expenditures. They're mostly funding, athletic activities at Clovis Unified. For me, it seems like they've become a subsidiary of Clovis Unified School District's athletic department. I don't see any significant successes in attracting major venues and events into our city. I think we're better off pulling away, keeping our tax money, and then us, investing in festivals that bring people to downtown or across the city. So I will be looking deeply into that space going forward. And then my last question, Mayor, around the budget generally is, there's been a lot of coverage about advanced peace and them losing federal dollars. I know the former chief, the current chief, yourself, this council supported advanced peace. The staff has indicated that they've been able to help reduce gun violence in the city. Would you support the council investing in advanced peace if we were to able to find the money within the budget?
Yeah, I support advanced peace. I don't know what their current funding is, what they have for this coming fiscal year. So, answering that question, and it would be without absent information. But I do believe that Advanced Peace is doing a good job. I think the police department will verify that. They've come a long way. They're doing a good job in stopping retaliatory type shootings. I would hate to lose their services. And I don't know what the impact has been from the federal government, if that's been solidified, but I know it was about $1 million, if in fact they went through with that.
Mayor, I had a conversation yesterday with the chief and with Shelby and Parks, and we are making some modifications to some funding that was through the city, remember the mental health funding, about them desiring to use that funding instead for their change agents as a partial reimbursement, and we've agreed to that. Shelby is working on the revised scope of work, and then I also understand that they have applied for another chunk of money from the state. Obviously, given the state, I don't know what the likelihood of that is, but we are working with them to fully understand their financial situation and how many people they are funding. We have VIPI money. We've funded them. We've had I can't remember the other one other funding source. So we are in talks right now to have a very clear understanding on which positions they've had to cut, because right now we don't have a clear understanding of that.
Yeah.
Fair enough. If we can just get a memo before the budget hearing so that we understand whether there's a role for us to play.
We'll get you a memo that talks about what loss of funding they've had, what this mental health shift is going to do in terms of adding funds, and what the potential is for them to get additional funds to replace it. And I think it's also important to know whether or not they did in fact lose that funding from the federal government, or if it's simply frozen at the point in time. I don't know that answer.
Okay, yeah, it's fair enough. I just want to make sure your budget includes money from Archer Mason Center. So I think it's a critical service, but avoiding people getting shot and killed is equally as critical as domestic violence prevention.
Agreed.
So if you guys can give us an update, that would be helpful in a couple of weeks. Well, with that, Mayor, thank you. My apologies for raising your blood pressure.
And my apologies for responding and allowing my blood pressure to be increased.
But in advance, we'll have a lot more of these interactions before we adopt the budget. That's our role. I embrace it. Your job is to present a proposal.
Yeah.
Our job is to go through it by details and pages and line items and give you guys a hard time so we get to a better budget. So
We're the entertainment that people desire. So.
well, without us, GV Wire wouldn't be around. So thank you, Mayor, and I look forward to reading the budget. And to our budget director, you have my constructive feedback.
Thank you.
Yeah, truth be told, I was going to make a motion for another Fireworks to Wally show, but we got fireworks this morning. Thank you, guys. You saved us taxpayers $100,000.
Yeah. So I wore red.
Next, we have Councilmember Vang.
Thank you very much, Council President Kerbasi and Mayor. Welcome, and welcome to all head departments. This is my first budget hearing, and just for visual purposes, like my other colleagues here, I brought all of the folders that was placed outside my door this morning, and there are 4 of them. And so my team and I will go through all of the pages one by one. Every sentence, every paragraph will be reviewed. But I want to start off with being that, first and foremost, no employee of the city of Fresno will be laid off this coming year, and that is great news. Again, every government jurisdiction in the state and even across the United States is facing negative. Our greatest resource is our human resource, and I want to thank the head departments for starting with you, trying to cut that 6%, or at the very least, leave the vacancy position vacant. And kudos to you. The city is only as good as the personnel that serves the 550,000 people here in the city of Fresno. So it starts with the head departments, trickle down to the person on the street and the person behind the phone every day. And I want to say thank you very much for you. This is a hard time. We are asking you to do a lot more with a lot less. And that is truly, if I were to ask myself to do more with less, I mean, I find it difficult, but we are in that position and we are facing that position today. I just want to make a few comments with regards to the presentation here this morning. In particular, the absence of one-time funding. I know, the Mayor, you noted that the CARES Act was 92.8, the American Rescue Plan Act was 170.8, and the Emergency Rental Assistance Program was 69. In total, that's $332 million. Now, compare that to the budget of 2.36, that's 14%. That's a one-time budget of 14%, and that is, again, a tremendous number that we are facing, that 14%, and we're going to be able to bring that down to 6%. Again, this is a one-time funding that is going to continue into the fiscal year 26 and perhaps 27 with regards to these programs. But again, we're asking everybody to do more with less. Again, with the $900 million for parks, public works, and capital improvement projects, again, that's about 40% of that 2.36 million. And so that is tremendous work, as City Manager indicated. We're going to be working a lot more, but hopefully, in terms of the visual, the City of Fresno can see more projects being erected and being visible. And so we're trying to provide as much service as we can, not only the human resource, but the the capital, the physical work of the city. And the 4 police officers coming in 2026, 2027. Again, we are asking for people to work more but the service level, again, it's going to stay the same or perhaps even increase, understanding that the expectation of the city council, the expectation of our citizens are to be the same, to be at the minimum what they've been receiving the last fiscal year. And so with regards to our police department, I'm glad that at the very least we are not having a status quo. We are adding at least 4 police officers to our fiscal year, and that is positive, again, on the service level on that as well. And Mayor, I wanted to thank you very much for keeping the residential infill program. It is true and near and dear to my heart as well, along with other programs, the eviction protection program. These programs were, I believe, started a few years ago by members of the council members here, and I am glad that you are keeping these programs going. If anything, status quo in terms of funding. Along with the Marjorie Mason, I know my colleagues echoed that earlier, and this is very important. And we will have more conversations about community-based organizations and funding, and I have some ideas. I know that my colleague Iris has mentioned one. I have a few that I'll have a conversation with your office as well. Again, the needs will continue to be there. Unfortunately, we may not, and it looks like we do not have the money to distribute across the board. But at the same time, we have to realize that the needs are still there, and we can find, and we should find every penny and every dollar under the rug, under the sofa, et cetera, to pay for those needs. I just have one comment, and in terms of the police officers, it is mentioned that there are about 88 patrol vehicles that will be phased out, and 30 will be placed on reserves, meaning that in case if there's an emergency.
43.
Right, 43.
43, yeah.
43.
They'll be not necessarily emergency, but they're available. What ends up happening is for every vehicle that's in our fleet, there's a O&M or operation and maintenance charge annually. It's about $11,000 per vehicle. And so when you remove those vehicles from the fleet, you reduce your O&M by $11,000 per car. We're doing that with unmarked cars plus the patrol cars.
Right, and that's my next question is, how much does it cost to keep or at least not to have those vehicles on the road? I know as minimum as it is, $10,000, $13,000 per vehicle. Again, we are facing a negative in our budget,
right. And
we need to demonstrate to the people in the city of Fresno that yes, we're trying to cut costs at every level. And if it's $10,000 or $1,000 here, $1,000 there, we are looking at every nook and cranny and trying to cut as much cost as possible.
Yes.
So thank you very much for anticipating my question and answering that. I'm looking forward to more conversations, more line item discussions, and I'm looking forward to having head departments coming up and answer questions from these 4 photos in front of me in the very foreseeable future, Mayor. Again, thank you very much, and this is my first budget. It appears that even though we are in the red, about 6%, balancing the budget is something that we must do on an annual basis. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't hurt our human resources, the people who works for the city, I think that at the minimum, it's a win. But the 6% across the board, it's a tough cut. But we're asking all of our employees and our head departments to look for those cuts and to energize the people who work under you to be the best public servants that they can be. Mayor, thank you very much for presenting your budget this morning. Thank you.
And to put your mind at ease, those are duplicates. So you got the one big book and the small book, and then the other one's for your staff. But it's a lot to absorb for sure. Thank you.
It is, and they're like small prints as well. A lot of numbers in there, Ed. Thank
A
you.
lot to absorb.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember. Next, we have Councilmember Richardson.
Councilmember Vang, this is going to be fun. Thank you. I'm going to keep this brief, not short. For anyone who struggles with object permanence, my name's Nick. I work here. Thank you for your patience over the last 2 meetings. When I was gone, for those of you who were patient, a little bit ironic that I leave my little deployment and come back here to what appears to be a true battlefield. So thank you. Just very quickly, I want to reiterate to those folks who I represent in District 6 and anyone else watching, my mentality going into this budget season, also my first, will be one, to minimize the impacts that the individual resident, individual citizen of Fresno feels. And secondly, I'm a huge proponent of the old adage that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if there's something that's a smaller expense up front that can save us from long-term expenses later on down the road, I am here for all of those conversations, be they in regard to mental health of those who provide our emergency services, reducing the costs of infrastructure with upfront infrastructure repairs, and then preventative measures such as advanced peace and the neighborhood watch. Things specific that I would like to see, and again, given the brief amount of time that we've had with the binders, I may have just missed it, but in the event that I did not, I've seen in the police, in the large binder, in the budget proposal, under the police section, particularly page B as in Bravo 171, I see the sergeants and officers moved over to the fax unit, iterated there. However, I don't see it in with regard to fax, Bravo 93 through 102 on the page. I did not see any acknowledgement there. It just seems like it's in one place and not in the other. And I also didn't see a line item for that. So if there's a line item I just missed as far as fax expenditure, I understand that's moving from PD to fax. And then secondly, the terms of the lease that's been taken out on the new and exciting helicopter, a personal passion point of mine, iterated on page Bravo 172. On the police portion, I'd just like to see the terms of that lease to include length and interest rate if possible. And I'll still be delaying my ride along with that due to my fear of heights. That's all I had at this time. Ed,
Coming from a helicopter pilot, right?
life's about facing your fear, sir. Ed, good work.
Thank you.
That's all I had.
Councilmember, I think you win the Brevity Award today. Great job. Okay, thank you, Mayor. This will be my 6th budget. I can't believe how the time has flown. I thought about, I in fact talked to you on the phone last night, and thought about what I was going to say today, and the first thing I was going to say is thank you, because this is the earliest we've received the budget. And typically mayors will never release the budget before June 1st. I don't know if it's a bureaucratic mindset, but you've released it earlier every year. And I appreciate that, because this council, I would say, is the most active council in the history of this city.
For sure.
I'm not saying we micromanage, but we really advocate for our districts, like with a fine-tooth comb. And the departments have to deal with that, and I thank you so much for your patience as we do that. But that's kind of our shared job together. When it comes to budget, I don't feel as much of that tension between administration and council. I think in the last few years, we've come a long way to actually work together to pass a balanced budget that we can all live with. So your cooperation has been very helpful, and I want to encourage that.
Thank you, Mike.
Yep. Having said that, I'm going to outline what I like in the budget and give kind of an idea of what I'll be looking at this year, just for the sake of, just to give the administration kind of a heads up of where I'm coming from. So I do agree with Councilmember Vang. We are a service business. We provide quality of life services, whether it's delivering clean water, picking up garbage, or trash everywhere, being able to provide public safety services, clean parks, bus service. All these things are really important. It requires people, and that's expensive. I'm so glad the people that are in their jobs are staying in their jobs, because that really translates into quality of life in Fresno. Thank you for doing that.
Yep,
and I think our employees appreciate that too. Go ahead.
I was just say layoffs are a last resort.
Yeah, well said.
100%.
When it comes to public safety, one of the areas I'll be focusing on, this is what I really liked, is I really appreciate the continued general fund investment in the 42 SAFER grant firefighter positions. This is critical for our city, not only for their safety, but the safety of the public. And a former police chief doing that, that's a good move. Thank you for supporting fire.
Well, I love my firefighters.
Fire Station 12, while it's not in my district, will service Northwest Fresno. Seeing that come to fruition, it's a big deal. It's a great addition. And then, of course, no surprise, adding 4 new police officer positions. You know, I've voted for every budget but one because I signed that pledge. And you witnessed that, the Safer Fresno budget pledge, no new cops, no budget, and adding 4 officers. It'll help us to maintain the fact that having those bodies out there really deters crime and is able to deliver the wins through Chief Casto's experience and the department's experience for the last few years. It makes a big difference for folks. In the vein of public safety, this will be one of my priorities this year. I'm not going to have a motion today, but I really do feel that we've done a great job of being able to identify the problem and using our brave men and women to tackle the problem and arrest folks. But I also think we have to do our part as a city when it comes to holding them accountable. And we've had a lot of efforts made in the last few years with wage theft and copper wire theft, working with the county. And I think we put too much on the county. We need to do our part as well. A big priority I've had over the years, as well as Councilmember Perea, are these misdemeanors that keep getting committed. I think it's really important if we can stop these criminals when they're committing things like porch piracy or copper wire theft at the misdemeanor level before they get elevated to a felony level, which costs taxpayers even more money. Recently, I worked with the city attorney. I've observed him making some additions in personnel and also just changing the structure of the office a little bit, and correct me if I'm wrong, city attorney, but creating a new criminal prosecutions and special projects team. This is very exciting. I think it's finally the next step in our work with the county to make sure we're doing our part and really taking ownership and going after these petty criminals, because I'm sure you get it all the time. Tired of hearing from constituents saying, I'm tired of these little petty thefts. What are we doing about it? And it's time for us to put up or shut up. So this is going to be one of my motions to help beef up this team. So I do thank the city attorney for your work in continuing this priority. When it comes to quality of life, another area that I'm really concerned about that we've done a lot is parks. And Aaron, you've done a great job. It's taken years, but you're going to see so many projects in Northwest Fresno. We still have to get to Stallion Park, which is what I'm going to work on this year. But the Milburn Overlook, after years, that's going to get redone. We've got Logan, which is really the childhood park I had in Northwest Fresno. And we've done work at Holman. We're doing work at Orchid Park, and Collegian Park has their lights coming in. Again, this is like 2, 3, 4 years in the making, but thank you to staff for your help with that. So a lot of great things happening, but we need to keep up that fight because it takes years. So now that the Pinedale Community Center is considered a high needs area, I'm going to continue advocating for more funding for that community center. It's the only one we have north of Bullard or Sierra, I believe. So thank you, Mayor, for your continued help on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And another area that's near to dear to me is our trails, beautification along our corridors, but especially the San Joaquin River. And we've talked a lot about that. We've worked a lot on that, Mayor, and just continuing our work to open up River West. And working with our partners at the county and the Conservancy Board. A lot of great things happening that's going to open up just miles of the Eaton Trail. It's going to be fantastic to really open it up for North Fresno, South Fresno, all of Fresno, and the county. So those are my priorities. Again, really good work. Thank you, City Manager. It is not easy. Thank you to the budget staff, Ed. Good work. What did the mayor say? You are good with numbers, or there was a...
Well, he's a walking computer.
Walking computer, okay. So I'm not going to call ISD. I'm just going to have you come and do some of the Excel stuff for me. No, I'm kidding. ISD does a great job. But thank you all for this. This is our big job as council, land use and budget. And this is why we're going to have very intense, tough conversations. But I'm confident this council is going to land somewhere on a budget we can all live with and hopefully retain the quality of service we provide our residents every day. There's going to be some tough fights ahead, but it's all in the vein of good government. So looking forward to it, and thank you very much. I have no other council members punched up. Anyone wishing to comment on this item? Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, appreciate you all. Look forward to it, kind of.
Kind of, yeah, there you go. Okay, so next item is general admin. We have a workshop regarding text amendment regarding increased housing opportunities. The sponsor is Planning and Development. I didn't see Sophia, sorry. Whenever you're ready, let me know.
Thank you. Council, ready to proceed?
We're ready to go. Yeah, thank you,
Yes.
Sophia.
Good morning, Council President Carbasi and members of the City Council. I'm Sophia Pagalatis, Planning Manager with the Planning and Development Department, and today we bring you a workshop on text amendment 2400794 regarding streamlining housing opportunities.
Staff, if we can go ahead and get you to exit so that Planning and Development can proceed with the next agenda item. Thank you.
PG&E, outside the chambers.
Thank you, Sophia, for your patience. Thank you.
Jose, take it outside and put the power back on.
Okay, I think we're ready to proceed. Thank you so much.
Great. The text amendment affects 3 zone districts, shown here with color coding to help identify them throughout the presentation. Office zoning is red, multifamily is blue, and mixed use is purple. This slide shows how the components of the text amendment apply in the 3 different zone districts. The first component is new residential uses, and these are only proposed in the office zone. They are office-to-dwelling conversions and new multi-unit residential on vacant land. The second component is a proposed process change, ministerial approval, that would apply in all 3 areas on the slide: the office zone, multifamily zones within half mile of a bus stop, and mixed-use zones within the infill priority area. This slide shows the same information in a different way. It shows where the new uses are proposed to be added, only in the office zone, in red, and where the ministerial approval process is proposed to be applied. These 2 components are independent of one another and could be considered separately. To demonstrate how the text amendment would amend the development code, this slide shows the table of contents and its 6 parts. Part 2, the base districts, is what we would typically think of as zoning and includes the regulations governing use, setbacks, and height, for example. Part 3 includes standards and requirements that apply to more than one zone district, such as parking, landscaping, and fencing. Part 4 applies to subdivisions. Part 5 includes all of the planning application types and approval authorities. And Part 6 is definitions. Indicated in red are the areas where the text amendment would amend the development code. The residential uses in the O district would appear in parts 2, 3, and 6. The ministerial approval process would live in part 5, administration and permits. Now to focus more deeply on the office zone district, where the use changes are proposed. But the key concept is that the office zone district allows many more uses than just offices. This slide shows what's allowed in the existing zone district, the many varied uses. One residential use is already allowed, lodging to dwelling conversion. Allowed public uses include schools, hospitals, social services, and emergency shelters. Commercial uses include auto-related uses, banquet halls, lodging, restaurant, and of course, offices. This slide shows the new uses proposed in the office zone, the office-to-dwelling conversion, and the new multi-unit residential on vacant land. In the prior development code, multi-unit uses were allowed in the office zone. This text amendment proposes to restore that to ensure more housing options. To address concerns...
Staff, one question, sorry.
Yes.
Are you not allowing for multi-use conversion on existing office buildings, just only on vacant land?
No, both.
Both?
Both, yes.
Okay.
Office-to-dwelling conversions are conversions within existing office buildings and new development on vacant land. This text amendment proposes to restore what our previous zoning code included. One exception was in relation to concerns heard during the planning process. An exception is proposed to address traffic and safety concerns adjacent to schools. It would prohibit new residential development of vacant or underutilized parcels in the office zone district within 500 feet of a school. In order to create more opportunity for housing, the city has committed to allowing residential in office zoning in multiple ways since 2022. First, in the One Fresno housing strategy, and then through its pro-housing designation. The city applied for and received this designation from the State Department of Housing and Community Development in 2022, and it includes a commitment to permit residential uses in non-residential zone districts. The pro-housing designation gives the city higher priority in accessing affordable housing funds, so it is advantageous to maintain. And I am told that the state is raising the bar and making the pro-housing designation a requirement to access certain grant funds. Currently, the city has an application in for homeless housing assistance and prevention for $10 million that depends on that pro-housing designation. Further commitments include City Council Resolution 2023-64, affirming the city's desire to pursue this text amendment, and the recently adopted six-cycle housing element, which includes a program that requires the city to add higher density residential capacity in what are called high-resource areas. Housing Element Program 2 requires the city to provide new capacity for 2,500 dwelling units by 2031, starting with 500 units of capacity this year. This map shows the high-resource areas where the additional capacity must be added. High-resource areas are defined by high incomes, high-performing schools, and high levels of community amenities. And you'll see those areas are defined in the dark blue and the sort of medium blue shade in the map on the screen. A text amendment that allows the new residential uses in the office zone district would accomplish this with one action. Without this text amendment, the alternative would be to rezone individual sites within the high-resource areas until the required new capacity is reached. If the city fails to meet the Program 2 deadlines, there could be financial or regulatory consequences. The second component of the text amendment, the process component, is ministerial approval. Ministerial approval is a streamlined process for approving development projects where judgment is limited to verifying compliance with established standards. In order to qualify, a project must meet all standards, otherwise ministerial approval cannot be granted. Ministerial differs from discretionary approval in that under discretionary approval, the review authority, the planning director, planning commission, or city council, can apply a variety of conditions of approval beyond the standards and regulations in the development code. Ministerial approval, on the other hand, is strictly limited to the application of codified objective standards. Currently, housing in downtown is set forth in the development code for ministerial approval, subject to certain code requirements. Both ministerial and discretionary approvals are appealable to the planning commission. The objective standards and regulations to be applied for ministerial approval start with zoning requirements that currently exist in the development code. These include the items you see here: use, height, facade design, pedestrian and vehicle access, and more. The next level of screening for ministerial approval is included in the text amendment, and it prohibits ministerial approval of a project on a sensitive site that has any of these characteristics: important farmland or land under Williamson Act contract, a flood hazard area, airport safety zones, hazardous sites, or a historic site or resource. The project must meet designated thresholds related to hazardous conditions, habitat, air quality, sensitive receptors, peak hour vehicle trips, and VMT thresholds, and It must meet public utility and storm drainage requirements, must comply with all mitigation measures from applicable prior environmental documents, and with noise and complete street standards. For a visual to bring all these factors together, this map shows the sites affected by the text amendment. The office sites in red that would allow the 2 new residential uses, multifamily sites within half-mile of a bus stop in blue, and the mixed-use sites in the infill priority area in purple. Note that the only change to the zone districts is adding the 2 new residential uses in the office zone. The other revision is the process change of allowing ministerial in all 3 categories. And here is each zone shown separately. This is the office, multifamily within half-mile of a bus stop, mixed use within the city's infill priority area. And to wrap up, a mitigated negative declaration was completed for this project last fall. It analyzed an additional 4,868 units of dwelling unit capacity for the new residential uses in the office zone district. This brings us to the final slide showing staff recommendation of 1, adding the 2 new uses to the office zone district, office to dwelling conversions, and new multi-unit residential on vacant or underutilized sites, and 2, allowing ministerial approval of housing projects in these areas that meet the criteria. So that concludes our presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Sophia. It's very thorough. I have right now 2 council members punched up. First is Councilmember Perea.
Yes.
Thanks, Sophia. All right. So we hear from a lot of folks about how they do not support sprawl in our city. This policy is to do the exact opposite, which is to prioritize infill housing and to make it easier to expedite and to construct infill housing vertical within our city limits. So the whole premise behind ministerial, and I get that it's a scary word, is to do something a little bit faster. And in this case, we chose housing. And I understand that this is not the first time we have done ministerial for housing historically. We currently do it right now in the downtown area. And we're simply just asking to open up the boundaries on where we can build more housing quicker in other corners of our city. And so with that being said, as you mentioned, this policy does a few things. It allows for more housing unit capacity in office-owned lands. And it allows for us to expedite the approval process for multifamily construction in transit corridors, but also in office-owned parcels as well. And what a lot of people think ministerial means is you're somehow bypassing rules, you're taking away the power from the legislative body, and both of those are simply not the case. And if the council reads the policy, you'll see that there are quite a few built-in development standards into this policy. There's a requirement for VMT management. I know that's a big one, especially on Herndon. There's this thought that we're going to increase vehicle miles traveled on these transit corridors. There's a requirement to mitigate that, vehicle miles traveled. There's a requirement to make sure that any future project is meeting infrastructure capacity requirements. We don't want to just keep approving projects that don't have the infrastructure there to serve it. I have a question about, let's say this council denies ministerial, but they approve the office to residential component. Okay, so we're going to move forward with office to residential. What permit would we use in that case? Would it just be a development permit?
That's my understanding. Is that correct, Director? Yeah, it would depend.
Okay.
It would depend. We have conversions would be different than potentially new development.
And development permits do not come before the Planning Commission or City Council.
That's correct, unless they're appealed.
unless
Yeah.
they're appealed. Okay, so we could take away ministerial. It would still require a development permit, would still not come before us unless it's appealed. Are there any off-ramp provisions in this ordinance that allows for a council member to appeal a ministerial approval?
Yes.
Okay, so what we're doing here is no different than if we were to drop ministerial entirely. It sounds like if we keep ministerial, there is still an off-ramp, so we still have the ability to appeal something. And I remember, Councilmember Maxwell, that was an important thing you brought up 2 years ago, and we initiated this conversation. If we eliminate ministerial, we just have the development permit, and that still will not come before us unless we appeal. So these processes are sounding very, very similar, and so I kind of want to explain just the difference. And we get asked all the time about making Fresno more business-friendly. How do we expedite the process? How do we remove the red tape, get government out of the way? This is our ability to finally do that while still maintaining our ability to appeal if necessary. We are doing the CEQA ahead of time, correct? And so part of ministerial is we do allow for a CEQA exemption. It's the ministerial CEQA exemption. And so that will allow for projects to not bypass CEQA. They're still required to adhere to mitigation measures from the underlying EIR. But what it does is it does allow an expedited process to move through our departments a little quicker. They're exempt from CEQA because ministerial projects are exempt from CEQA. But if there is a chance that this project is controversial for whatever reason in District 6, District 2, District 5, we have built in the off-ramps to allow a council member to still appeal. And so I don't want this policy to take on a notion that we are taking any power away from a council member, because you could get rid of the ministerial component now, but again, all that would be required is a development permit, and that still doesn't come before a planning commission or city council unless you appeal. You could take away ministerial now, it'll be pretty much the same status quo process, but the project will be subject to have to go through potentially an EIR process, which could add 1 to 2 more years onto a project's timeline, hundreds of thousands of dollars onto a project's timeline. And so what we're doing at the end of the day is we're not expediting housing construction. We are in a housing crisis right now. That's not new to anyone. And this is a policy that will allow us to start acting like we're in a housing crisis. And so at the end of the day, this is something that we did initiate 2 years ago, over 2 years ago. I think it's a well put together policy that captures a lot of allowing us to expedite, but still making sure we follow the spirit of CEQA, making sure we follow the spirit of mitigating traffic impacts, mitigating air quality, greenhouse gas. I think there was a requirement to for projects to have to do a health risk assessment if they met a certain threshold. And so I just kind of wanted to debunk this notion that this policy strips this council's voice. That's simply not the case. What this does is it retains our ability to have influence while still giving projects a chance to go through an expedited process. And not to mention, this is something we said we would do in our One Fresno strategy. Our housing element, our pro-housing designation depends on it. And then right now, Sophia, I think you did say that the current office zoning allows for uses such as hotels, hospitals, restaurants, schools, and parking lots. Is that correct?
Yes.
So a lot of traffic-inducing uses are already allowed in these office-zoned corridors. And again, what this policy does is it adds just residential to this list of allowable uses. And if anything, it builds in a lot more safeguards to mitigate impacts that it doesn't for these other uses like hotels or hospitals. And I want to respect my colleague in District 2. Their he's had a lot of pushback from residents who are worried about this idea of inducing traffic in school zones. We see it every day in every school zone all over the city. And I'm sensitive to that too, council member, and so I do not want this policy to negatively impact areas, especially around our schools. And that's not just in your district, that would go for any of our districts. And so I do appreciate staff building in that 500-foot, I think it's 500-foot radius around schools to make sure that we are being thoughtful as to where we are allowing a expedited process to occur. So this is over 2 years in the making, and we did take a lot of good feedback from previous council discussions. And so I would like to hear from my other colleagues just to kind of get a sense of where they're at and if they have any questions at this point. Thanks, Council President.
Okay, thank you. I have Councilmember Richardson punched up. Are you okay if I ask a question? You sure? Okay, thank you. I do appreciate Councilmember's point, and I appreciate staff for putting in that buffer. That does help quite a lot. Thank you for that. I think this is just a difference of philosophy. When we discussed this item a few years ago, it was the pandemic, and we were concerned we'd have a lot of vacant office space, and it is still a very novel idea to convert existing offices into residential. I just have one question. So, like when the Costco came forward to the council, I had a lot of pushback from residents, and pushback's a good thing. It keeps us accountable, and it gives us an opportunity to interact with the public. But they would say, we don't want that here, and I'd say, because we have our homes and it affects our values and all those things. And I would say, well, you bought your home knowing that was zoned, and that could have been a Costco or a Walmart or something else. And I had no problem making that point. Let me give you a scenario. So there's a piece of land that has been zoned for 20 or 30 years as office, and there are potential other uses, as was outlined. But right now, if I'm a developer and I want to take that parcel and I want to make that a multi-story, a 4-story apartment complex, which is fine. We need housing in Fresno. Right now, without this, what's the process to do that? It's zoned office, and I want to put a 4-story apartment building on there.
Currently, you would have to apply for a rezone.
Okay.
Yes.
And that rezone goes to the council.
Correct.
If we pass this item, then what's the process?
The process would be that if the project, are you speaking about new development on vacant land?
The situation where it's zoned for office and someone wants to put a multifamily project in there.
Correct. It would go through the numerous filters and thresholds and be evaluated on a ministerial basis. And there are numerous opportunities where if it does not meet the threshold, then it just defaults to a discretionary process.
But if the developer does all those things, it does not come to this council.
That is correct.
Unless the council member appeals it.
That's correct.
Assuming that we know it's happening, assuming that we have the future council has a good relationship with the administration, which we do now. And that's the hiccup I have. This is basically allowing ministerial rezones. After people are in established neighborhoods and have bought their properties knowing this land is zoned office, meaning there's only certain hours of the day, people are going to be there, there's certain uses. That is where I have a hiccup. Taking that power away from me as the representative is something I find unacceptable. It's a hard pill to swallow. When I say it's a difference of philosophy, I can support so much of the policy we may be considering, but that is a tough pill to swallow, giving one person who's respectfully unelected the authority to rezone a property. So that's the point I'm trying to make. So that's my comment. Councilmember Richardson.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for being here. This seat is temporary and is not mine, so it belongs to the folks I represent. So I want the assurance that they're still going to have the same abilities, not myself, but that the residents are going to have the same ability to come forward and voice their concerns, voice their support or their opposition for a project in the same manner and with the same consistency that they are now if it's approved ministerially, if that makes sense. Would you mind speaking to that a little bit?
Yes, I would say that currently the ministerial process, one of the benefits is the streamlining factor. So there would not be public notice or any type of public review of the project. It would be processed ministerially, just as Councilmember Perea pointed out, development permits are processed today. They're not ministerial, but they are processed administratively without coming to Planning Commission or City Council. So, I'm sorry, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Council President?
Sorry, yes, please. And then Council Vice President after you.
Okay. So if somebody files for a rezone, that will come to the City Council for a public discussion and vote. If something is processed ministerial, it gets appealed, that will come to the council, potentially the Planning Commission and then City Council for a public discussion and a vote. Is that correct?
Yes. Did you say if the council appeals a ministerial project?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you repeat that again, just for my?
If a rezone application comes before the Planning Commission and then the City Council, that will be a public discussion and vote. If a ministerial item is appealed by a council member, then that item will come before the Planning Commission and possibly the City Council for a public discussion and a vote.
That's my understanding.
Okay. There is so much that is approved in the city that we don't see. When it comes to development permits, you guys probably approve them every day, all day. And so I guess what I'm trying to do with this policy is just add one more use to that expedited list of items that don't necessarily have to come before us, but if we want them to come before us, we still have that off-ramp to do so. We have done text amendments before where we allow new uses into zones. And so I can appreciate, I didn't buy my home knowing possibly there might be a duplex or a sixplex planned on an office-owned parcel next to me. And there's a lot of uses that are going to be changed over time to allow new types of uses to go into new zones. That's the whole premise of the zoning ordinance. It is static to some degree, but it does adapt over time to meet new needs. Same with the general plan. And so I think, Council Member President, this will just be a difference in philosophy. I think we're still achieving the same thing at the end of the day. And if anything, this ministerial policy does build in a lot more requirements than possibly what is required with simply just a development permit. And so there is going to be a scrutinized process moving forward for ministerial projects, more so than what we have today. And there are still off-ramps if the council so chooses to utilize those. And I know somebody mentioned, well, how do we know there's an approved development permit in my district so that I even know that there is something to possibly appeal? And I get it. We don't always have great relationships with the administrations, either before us or after us. And, thankfully we have that now. And so I'm open. I don't know if this is a city attorney question or not, but I'm open to doing if this policy is approved, if we could build in some sort of an annual review to see is ministerial working? Are too many council members getting bypassed with projects that maybe they wanted to appeal but they weren't notified of it? There should be some safeguards. This is a really new thing. I don't want to say really new thing. We already do this in downtown. We're just and again, we do this for affordable housing projects. So we do ministerial processing for affordable housing projects. Right now, we're doing quite a few on Blackstone. We're just simply asking to do the same for market rate housing too.
Right.
Council member, I think it's on point. You could require the department to notice you if a project is approved. You could build that into this.
I would like to build that into this, and I have already requested departments send me notification when there are certain permits approved in my district in case I do want to appeal.
Yeah.
I don't know if every council member has requested that, but I would like to build that into the policy. If any ministerial action is taken that approves a project in any one of our districts, that the respective council member does receive that notification.
That way, regardless of the relationship between the administration and the council, it is in the policy and it just becomes a requirement.
I like that idea, and again, as many safeguards as we can build into this ahead of time, I think that hopefully should give the comfort, and it may not work at the end of the day, council members, and so I do think keeping that annual review assessment in there is good too. That way, if we need to go back and just entirely revoke this because it's just not working and too many projects are being approved without our say, then we have that ability to do that too. But I think simply not trying to build more housing quicker in our city is not the answer either.
Yeah. No, and again, I agree with parts of this, and I really appreciate your comments sincerely, and a lot of it makes sense. Number one is if it gets appealed. I do like the idea of putting a safeguard in there. Now, I do get reports, thanks to, just like you do, from planning director on new permits that are pulled in my district, and that does help me a lot. But this isn't just for today. This isn't for this council. This is for in perpetuity, and who knows what things are like in the future. I do like the idea that we might put a safeguard in there, but I also know how politics works, unfortunately. That's one of the things you learn in this job, and the scenario I don't want is there to be a council member who, this is not anyone here, just by definition, a council member who wants to be cowardly and say, well, you had this piece of land that was zoned for office, you bought your homes 20 years ago knowing it's zoned for office and that's the use, and I can't do anything about it. I can't get the votes, I'm sorry. I can appeal it, but I can't get the votes. I've seen that happen before, and I made it clear I'm not that person. I know it's easy to take that road. It's not for me. And I don't want to encourage an environment where that will happen, because that will absolutely happen. And by definition, we are taking authority away from the council and the people. The one thing I know is I'm not against ministerial. We do ministerial all the time. What I'm against is a rezone that would be ministerial. That is very unfair. That's where I have the biggest hiccup. If that wasn't there, I think I'd be okay. I just don't know how fundamentally I can wrap my head around allowing a rezone of a vacant office parcel or anything to something else without going through the public process. And I know why the developers like this. It's a huge workaround. I just think it's very unfair to the public. And I do think this council has been very pro-housing. We've probably awarded more affordable housing in the last 5 years than ever before, and we need more market rate, and I'm the biggest proponent of that. But we also have to respect the people that also bought their market rate homes and want a say in what happens. And a rezone's a big deal without it going to the council. Councilmember, Vice President next, and then Councilmember Maxwell.
I think Maxwell asked to skip.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay.
Thank you for the presentation, Sophia. I just want to say to Councilmember Perea, I fully support this. I talked about this a little bit in the last council meeting when we were talking about South Seda. I think the biggest enemy of more housing is legislative bodies throughout California, right? We become so involved in the process and so concerned about the process that we've lost sight of the outcome, which is to make more housing. And I think we've been our own biggest enemies, and I think we need to get out of our way, even if that means diminishing some of our own power here on the council. I think that's a worthwhile pursuit. To be honest with you, this was proposed by the administration in 2021 or 2022, and I was pretty skeptical. I wasn't really sure the intentions behind this when it was first floated around, and it took you coming on and explaining it from our side, right, and our perspective. But when we initiated it, you had me fully on board. I'm still fully on board. I was planning on proposing something similar to what city manager and you talked about, is building in a notification system that allows council members to have that ability to know when a potential rezone is coming up, to allow us to appeal it and potentially notice the public too if that's necessary, so that they're aware and they could come speak on the issue. I'm open to changes. We spent 2 years of staff time and taxpayer dollars getting this far. I would hate to see this fall short if there's not some way that we can make some slight amendments and push this through today. I think it really would be to the betterment of our city and future generations. We can't just continue to be a body for passing through dollars for housing projects. We got to do more. We got to get out of our own way. We're in a crisis right now. It's only going to worsen in the next 5 to 10 years. And when we're asked what we did, we can't just say that we continue to do more of the same or continue to pass through dollars towards projects. We have to do something bold. We have to do something definitive. I think this is a big step in that direction. So I'm happy to support this as is. I really think this is a good thing for our city. I think it's pro-housing. I think it's pro-people. It's pro-growth. Generate more dollars for our city. I'm open to some ideas. If some of the folks that have already spoken have ideas as to what it would take to get you on board with an amended version of this, I'd be open to hearing that and open to some suggestions too. But those are just my 2 cents. Oh, and not to mention, I mean, you talked about the EIR as well, right? I mean, how many thousands of dollars that adds to the cost of doing business in the city of Fresno? It's crazy. So to be able to eliminate that, which we know is a significant obstacle to developing in the city of Fresno, California, would be huge. So for all those reasons, I support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member, and I'm open to hearing from all of my colleagues if there are additional changes you'd like to propose. This item is not going to be voted on today, so it will come back for first reading on the 22nd. So if there are any other ideas that you feel would be beneficial to incorporate to earn your trust, I'll be eagerly waiting to hear those on the 22nd.
Thank you. Council President, if I may. So, I think I'm officially the only member who's lived with this ministerial authority in their area, right? Downtown is ministerial.
Housing in downtown is, yes.
A couple of just takeaways. One is I think staff is underplaying the significance of not approving this change in city process, specifically around the pro-housing designation. You made a reference to dollars that would be at risk if we were to lose that designation. What is that amount again?
I would have to go back to our housing division to get a full amount. I just mentioned one HAP application.
Is it in the millions?
Yes.
Can it be in the tens of millions?
It's about 10, but that may not be the total. That's just one application.
And that's going forward, we would lose out on future funding sources for housing.
Well, it's pro-housing designation is one of the criteria for being able to be awarded.
And it also gives us additional points, and not just us, but our housing partners.
Yeah.
If your city is a pro-housing designation, it gives you like extra points, I believe, on tax credit applications. So perhaps the Housing Authority and other affordable housing developers.
So, we just got a budget presentation in which the mayor's blood pressure went up. But all kidding aside, with the very clear picture of we need more outside revenue, he made it a point to emphasize that, in order to keep all our employees employed, we would have to depend on outside revenue. If we were to fail to move this policy forward, we would be handicapping our city's ability to obtain the outside revenue to build this aggressive agenda of addressing the housing crisis. As the council president noted, we initiated this policy during the pandemic where office use was down. But secondarily is because we had a housing crisis. The latter continues to exist. There is a housing crisis in our city. And I recall some of my colleagues suggesting that the best way out of a housing crisis is to build, build, build. And I do think there's some parts of that, because the alternative is rent control, and the alternative is more encampments. As I remind our neighbors at times, if you don't want an apartment complex in your backyard, you're going to end up with the homeless encampment in your front yard, in the front of your business, in the front of the canal embankments across the city. I don't think we need additional adjustments to this proposed policy. I know the member Perea is open to that, but here's why. One, council offices already have access to the same planning and development software system that planning staff does. My staff proactively goes into the systems to assess the status of permits, what projects are in the queue. We already have ability to appeal items. I think this council, the last time I appealed a ministerial approval was related to Golden Charter School, where the chambers were full of kids and people were discussing why we appealed the development permit. But that's the role of the council office. The role of the council office, and why we gave six-figure salaries to members of this body, and why we've given them year over year support staff, is that they engage in what's taking place in their respective areas. They appeal decisions by administrative staff so it can be heard, and the neighbors can be heard, and we can hear the item in a public setting. So all those things continue to exist, as has been noted, this policy as written already allows a council office to appeal it. You know, we all have the same amount of budget resources in each council office. Not one office has less money than the other. If it requires that some offices hire more people with their existing allocation to do this proactively, so be it. This already exists in downtown. I have not had any experience in which I feel like I was out of the loop. It does require council members to pay attention, to show up and be present, to have professional staff that understand development, and to engage continuously with planning staff, but that is the job. I do have some concerns over the buffer of near schools, primarily around that doesn't exist anywhere else. And I'm concerned that we are artificially creating different land uses in certain parts of our city. So if you don't have a 500 buffer provision in downtown or in central Fresno, why are we building one in this space? It makes no sense to me. I think it's part of us going down the path of reverting back to the old days, a tale of two cities, me having explained to residents while some parts of the city are built differently than other parts of the city. I think if we should be looking at this as a citywide policy that treats every neighborhood the same, both on buffers. You know, when we just took on the smoke shop ordinance, we did not indicate a buffer only exists in this area of town and not in this area of town. Buffers apply to the whole city as a whole. So I would just ask my colleagues to let's be consistent in approaching this housing crisis the way we have in the past, which is making it easier. And to Member Perea, I know she's very cordial and collaborative, but one thing that I found being in this body is when you take 7 of us and the administration, the 8th person, coming up with some compromise, it only makes the process more complicated, more involved, more delayed, and ultimately sometimes it slows down the initial intent that staff had for making things quicker and faster. This policy, if approved, would still give the council member ability to appeal and for the body and the public to hear that appeal publicly. So I have not seen a problem with it in downtown, but I appreciate that it's not the same built environment as the rest of the city. The only hesitation I do have with this policy, and I want to be very crystal clear about this, my understanding of this policy is that this was initiated separate and apart from any other rezone application before the council, correct? And it is not intended to be tied to any specific rezone application that's before the city.
Correct.
So just for the record, I believe these policies should stand on their own merit, on their own process, on their own CEQA. If this policy is tied to a specific rezone application with specific special interests involved in it, I will oppose the policy because I think that violates the integrity of the process and the commitment that we've made to the public to be transparent and to be truthful in why we are proposing policy changes across the city. So I appreciate the discussion. I thank the council president for setting up this workshop. I think this was long needed to get clear. I do appreciate staff putting up together those maps that you guys produce for us, especially for those of us who are older and can't see all that well, very tiny zoning maps. But this is the last part of the city where this ministerial authority needs to be brought forward. And I am fully confident that the next council member or 2 or 5 in any part of the city will be active. And if they're not, shame on them because they're picking up the salary and the paycheck to be active and present for their council districts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Before we go to the city manager and then Councilman Esparza, just a couple quick observations. Can you give me a breakdown of the number of units? There's different components to this measure. So like how many units will we be allowing for the HCD requirement if we convert existing office buildings to residential, and how many for vacant land to residential? Because I don't want people thinking it's an either or.
Right, so the environmental document covered 2,600 units approximately of capacity for conversions of office to
Okay.
residential, and 2,100 units of capacity for new development on vacant office.
And just
So-
to be clear, yeah, this is great. So about total, how much, 4,000?
About 4,800 units,
This
yes.
is all on paper. That doesn't mean we're actually going to be building these housing units, correct?
It's capacity.
It's capacity, that's
Yes.
it. So I don't want people thinking all of a sudden by doing this or not doing this, we're going to be destroying our ability to, the housing isn't going to be built. There's market forces and all kinds of things that have to happen.
That's right, and it's all about creating the capacity.
Right. So then that's what the state is requiring us to do, create the
Correct.
capacity. Okay. Now, let's say the council realizes this didn't work. We look at an annual report, oh, this was bad. City attorney, what is the process to revoke this power away from the administration and back to the elected officials?
You would have to go through the same process that we went through to get here today.
So, text amendment,
Yes,
how long does that take? We've been here, what, 2 years now?
approximately.
So, potentially, let's say someone's towards the end of their term and they want to stop this, they'd be gone before they can do anything about it. Potentially.
Theoretically.
Oh, hold on, City Attorney, I just want to clarify. If you're just talking about the ministerial component, so I think undoing allowing residential and office would be a
ministerial.
significantly longer process.
I'm referring to ministerial.
Okay, I don't think we're talking about a 2-year process just to remove the ministerial component.
That's not what I was told before, so I'd like some
Right, that's
clarification
why
on
I
that.
just want to clarify with
I
the
was told it'd
attorney's
be
office.
longer.
I don't believe that.
I misunderstood your question.
Okay. So let's say the council does give the authority for raw land, let's say, to be converted to housing. And that's ministerial, meaning a director will be able to do that. What is the process for the council to say, okay, maybe we want to parse that back and bring it back to this body? How long is that process? And what is the process?
So there's actually several things that the council is looking at today and considering, and we'll actually have your first reading next week.
Yes.
One component is ministerial, and that would apply to any of these 3 zoned. Okay, you're doing that. I thought I had a weird flasher in my eye, and I was having a stroke. Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, okay.
Okay, I was like, what is this flashing? Thank you. So it's a procedural issue, so a text amendment to remove a procedural issue, and I defer to the city attorney, but in my opinion, would be a no possibility of a CEQA impact because it is simply procedural. It would mean instead of having pre-done CEQA, then we go back to everybody has to do their own CEQA in advance, right? So taking out ministerial could be as easy as 90 days because it has it goes through all of the committees, it goes to Airport Land Use Commission, it goes to Planning Commission, it comes here, so it's more about the city council can initiate that text amendment, and then we would just take it through all the committees. So taking that ministerial provision out and putting it back in as discretionary could be a simple process. Then there's the question of there's 2 uses that are going to be permitted on the use table. Again, we're not converting office land to residential. We are not doing a rezoning. We are adding a line on the use table. The use table is about yay big.
I hear you.
It hangs in my office, right?
Director, I hear you. Like the way we can allow a hotel, for example. We're adding another component to that. I hear you. It may not be called a rezone, but you're adding a different use to that property that wasn't zoned previously for residential.
In the last 6 to 7 years, that is absolutely accurate. Prior to 2016, residential multifamily was permitted in office zone districts. So anyone who purchased their home prior to 2016, that was a permitted use in that zone district.
But not today. That was taken back, correct?
That was taken away. So the last 7 years-ish wasn't allowed. Absolutely. So taking that, putting the use on the table is what we're doing today, right? So you're putting it on as a permitted use, and we're asking for ministerial. And as Sophia said earlier, those are those can be taken separately, right? So they don't have to be, it's not necessarily has to be combined, right? And so then each of those uses, so the conversion piece, which we, is not necessarily unique, but it does add a lot of expense that I think that the industry has said, at least in Fresno, our land prices are not high enough, our prices are not high enough for conversion to pencil out without subsidy, right? So we're adding that line item as a potential use, and we're adding the line item of allowing residential on vacant land or currently unutilized or underutilized land. So to remove both of those would require text amendment and would require an analysis. And again, I would love for the city attorney to tell me I'm wrong, but in my opinion, taking away this use does not create a new impact, and we would have to analyze that, but taking away the use does not create an impact or to the environment. Right. So would it take 2 years? Probably not, but we would need to analyze that when it came up.
That helps a lot. And my specific question, City Attorney, if you can get back to us at some point, is before the next meeting, is if the council were to remove the ministerial authority for the vacant land portion of it only. That's where my area of concern is. That helps a lot. Thank you. And the talk that we had, I know there's now talk about, I really appreciate, I think Councilmember Perea mentioned being open to allowing maybe a list to be generated to be shared with the council members of all projects moving forward under ministerial, so a council member knows they have the ability to appeal, much like a veto, how that works. But now that's being suggested to be taken out. That's really alarming. I think we're taking a step back. And removing the buffer. Specifically, the buffer only applies to the portion that is regarding the vacant land, correct? Vacant land being converted. So that's something unique. I mean, we have ministerial approval, but forgive me, I'm going to say it's a ministerial rezone. That's just my term for it. That's not the same as we have in downtown. So this is a very unique situation, and having this buffer isn't, I don't think it's really comparable.
So the ministerial is, there aren't a lot of uses in Fresno that are ministerial. One is housing downtown. One is a new home duplex in a neighborhood, right? So those are all ministerial, so they do not require or they don't allow us to place conditions. So what's the difference between the two, right? So ministerial says you have to comply with all of the development standards here to get this special streamlined processing. So say I want something different, taller, lower setbacks, less parking, that no longer qualifies for ministerial. It has to go through the standard development process with a development permit, which would then go to the committees, and then they would give feedback, so there would be that notification. Again, as the council member stated and as the city manager stated, the council could say today, that notice would be provided upon approval of an action, right? So if the department approved an action. An example of that is when multifamily is constructed in RS5 zone district, when we approve it, we provide notice. So it wouldn't be unique and unusual to add that into this legislation.
Got it.
Okay.
Very helpful. Well, this was, we have one more speaker punched up. This was a very robust conversation, very helpful, and I appreciate that. Councilmember Esparza, followed by Councilmember Richardson.
Yeah, thanks, Council President. Very robust conversation. Appreciate the back and forth and all the good points. You know, I've heard what was said about still continuing to have the ability to appeal, and much to Councilman Richardson's point, it's not about us. It's really about the residents we represent and giving them the ability to weigh in. And so one thought I had, probably a question more for the city attorney, but I'll take the answer from anyone. If we were to pass this policy and can retain our ability to appeal a project, make adjustments, or deny a project, how does that impact the defensibility and or liability of the city's position Does this policy impact that aspect more so than it already does, than where we are currently?
Either way. So so if someone, let's say staff approved an application that met all of the criteria, all the ministerial criteria, right? If met the fire flows, the water flows, the traffic, et cetera, checked all the boxes. We provide notice. You say, nope, I'm going to appeal that. The only thing that Planning Commission, and then if it's appealed from Planning Commission to City Council, could consider is whether or not it met the objective development standards in the code, right? And so then there was another example recently of it was whether or not a parking lot was paved for a tow yard. And does it meet that ministerial criteria? And the question is yes or no, and what is the substantial evidence in the record that yes, it does? And so that's where that defensibility would lie, is whether or not we follow that process. City Attorney.
I don't want to get too far into liability, but as part of this process, I don't know if you were asking a more specific question like that or sort of broadly. We've analyzed that in terms of making any recommendations to planning on this.
Is that so, Director? What you described, is that different from the predicament now? Because what you described is what would happen under the policy, under the text amendment. Is that different? What I'm getting at is whether this impacts the liability or impacts the defensibility of our position when we do, if and when we do deny something.
So in multifamily zone districts, in mixed-use zone districts, when a development permit is approved, the city has the discretion to place conditions of approval. There needs to be some form of a nexus, but the city has broad discretion as to what that nexus is. So I like to use the example of, there's a, requirement of 10 street trees. They have to pull from this approved list. We can't say, I don't like the tree you picked. I would prefer that you do 11 instead of 10. We have no discretion. It either meets or doesn't meet that requirement. In the current situation, that's under ministerial. Currently, we can add discretion to that. Well, I would prefer that this, or I would prefer that. It makes it very difficult on an applicant. Not that our team necessarily does that, but it makes it very difficult on an applicant if the rules of the game aren't very clearly identified. This provides all those rules of the game, not just for those trees, but also for the amount of fire flow, the amount of water flow, the amount of sewer flow, whether or not there needs to be additional pedestrian paths of travel. That's all already built into the code, so that isn't an unknown when an applicant comes in. And so that's the major difference, is knowing all those rules up front versus how are we going to apply those rules as we go along, and whether or not it would change if it was appealed when it goes to Planning Commission and their preference, and if it was appealed, what is the preference of the City Council, right? So those are already baked in, so the rules of the game everybody knows before they start playing.
Sure. I mean, when a project occurs in someone's district, and there's concerns from the neighborhood or from the surrounding properties, they're going to come to the council member. And so, whether this text amendment is in place or not, they're going to come to us. And so, again, just trying to get to that question of, what the action this council takes and whether that's going to ultimately have the ability, increase the ability for actions to be overturned by the judicial branch. That's what I'm looking at.
Got it. And I can't speak to whether or not a court would overturn a council action or a planning commission action any differently under ministerial than under discretionary.
All right, thank you.
Next, we have Councilmember Richardson and then Councilmember Bank.
I think there are some benefits to this. And at first, I wasn't a fan because of the concerns that I expressed earlier. The libertarian in me loves the idea of removing bureaucracy from these decisions to let things get done quicker, put people in houses, put roofs over heads. I love that. The other side of me, my responsibility to my constituents, is to make sure that they have their opportunity, as many opportunities as legally they should be afforded to voice their concerns. So I've been sitting over here trying to noodle and figure out how to square that circle. And I think there is a way, and I don't know the feasibility of this, if we can be kind of scalpel-minded instead of sledgehammer-minded. But if we're, because I can think right now of places in my district that would be fantastic for this sort of approach, and some other places that would not be fantastic for this approach. So if there were any sort of way that we could go through, maybe take a month or two, do the research, and list out areas where we'd be willing to adapt a ministerial approval approach to it, I think we could do that. That's fantastic homework on our side that we could do. Again, we could come up with a list, whether it was by, coordinates, whether it was by name of street or whatever else. If we could go through and actually get that feedback from our constituents and find out, hey, is this something you'd be in favor of doing? I know for a fact there are acres and acres and acres of land in District 6 where the folks would not mind having this approach. And I know that there are some where it'd be very, very hotly contested, and I wouldn't be acting in the best interest of my constituents by approving that. So if we could do this instead of just a writ large policy for the entire city, if there were something we could put in this text amendment that could iterate specifically where this approach could be taken, I could definitely get on board with that, because I would have the chance to go to my constituents, voice this to them, bring it up at town halls, show a map, have time to receive hate mail or whatever else, and really get a full, accurate picture of the voice of what folks are looking for in their communities. And I could 100% be down with that.
I can appreciate the intentionality of really trying to work toward, where does this work? Where will this not work? I think we start getting into piecemealing or spot zoning, which is not necessarily a legal practice. And so I, too, am trying to figure out, is there that one perfect overlap where we can all sleep at night? And I don't know if we will get there, but I do respect where you're coming from in that regard. I think this would be a great policy along Herndon in your district and in other areas too, especially on these transit corridors. But I think what you just described, I don't know if that would be a legal path forward to achieve that. And I see you shaking your head, City Manager. Unless I'm wrong, I'm open to ideas. I just want to make sure we're following the right process.
If I may, Council President, we do have maps now, right, that we could demonstrate to folks and to the public where this policy would apply, correct? Do we have that already?
It was in the PowerPoint, yes. The maps have been published as part of this text amendment and in the EIR.
So if you have some comments,
yes.
Councilmember Vang's been patient.
Okay. Me or him?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. So two things. I kind of had a little bit of an epiphany thinking about all of the discussions that have been going on. And it comes down to sort of really simplified thing in my brain. You have, as the council member Perea stated, you have no idea how many projects get discretionally approved every day. And what we're talking about, what we're really focusing most of the time on are the in essence, the ones you'd be most concerned about. And I would argue that that is the very small minority of projects. So right now, the large majority of projects that are processed in this city are going through a much more burdensome, time-consuming, time is money process in order for the minority few to be able to go through this multi-layer discretionary purpose. So it is a matter of sort of perspective of, do you want to preserve the process that affords every opportunity for that very few select projects in the city that your constituents may be concerned about while holding the majority of the projects to a process that takes a much longer period of time. And what we're suggesting with this is because of obviously the housing crisis that we're in and the requirements under the housing element to have the required number of units designated in the housing element, what we're suggesting is we let the majority go through. We preserve the appeal process for council for those projects that might cause you concern. So it's just sort of flipping the process on its head of letting everything that's not a problem zip through, and projects that could be a problem affording you that appeal process that would allow you to have that input.
I'm more confused because now
Oh,
you told me
sorry,
that,
I
no,
was
it's
hoping
okay.
to
No,
unconfuse it.
I get the point. Now you're telling me there's a bunch of projects being approved we don't know about. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, development permits.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, I'm being facetious. The point
okay.
I'm trying to make here is, yes, those ones are controversial, but we as the elected body have the ability to appeal it. I know the way politics works. If we pass this, the council member's going to say, I can't get 4 votes. I'm so sorry. I've watched politicians do that. That's what's going to happen.
Mike, I totally hear you, and I think once you try and start controlling your colleagues, that's a losing battle, right? All you can do is control yourself, right? And you're going to do what you think is in the best interest.
Right.
I also want to address what Councilmember Richardson said, and we didn't dig into this because I told staff not to be too boogeyman-y on this. We just really wanted this to be heard on its merits and be considered on its merits. I do want to make sure that you are very, very clear that we do have a requirement to maintain the pro-housing designation and to be compliant with our housing element to we have to create more units in the high opportunity zones. So we showed you the maps, the dark blue and the light blue and the kind of slate blue of where those areas are. And so if the council chose not to proceed with this, what ministerial or not, but not to proceed with allowing residential and as a use, what we would still have to proceed with trying to get the capacity that we need to get, and it would definitely, I think that we will definitely lose our pro-housing designation because we are on a timeline. We have been telling HCD, they know we've been working on this for 2 years, and if they don't see us moving forward, they will likely pull our pro-housing designation. Now, that's not to say we can't get it back again, but it would put us off the table for some needed housing funding in the future. But if we did lose the pro-housing designation, we'd move forward. We would still have to go parcel by parcel, sort of how Nick was describing. We still have to get the units from the highest and high resource areas. So if you look on that slide that shows those 3 blues, in essence, it would be we'd have to go through, we wouldn't be able to do it as part of this CEQA and this environmental impact report because we've analyzed a completely different process. We would have to go through and rezone parcel by parcel in the highest and high resource areas and do the associated environmental with that. That's going to take us years. And we will likely be out of compliance with our housing element during that time. Once again, I don't want to be the boogeyman. I just don't want to hear if we choose not to move forward, well, why didn't you tell us this? So I'm telling you that is a possible unintended consequence of not moving forward. I just want to make sure you know that so that you have the full information in front of you in your decision-making process. And that's all I have. Thank you.
City Manager. And thank you for being patient, Councilmember Vang. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Council President Kabasi. And not in a hurry. We have 8 more minutes before we hit noon. So I'm going to be quick as possible. Again, all of us here in this room, including the elected officials here on the dais and the mayor, agreed that there is a housing crisis in the city. And we'll continue to have a crisis. And we're going to have to deal with that in the past, now, and the future. Director Clark, in the presentation, the 3rd to last page, Public comments were allowed from November 20th through December 20th of 2024. Were there any comments made by the public? I don't have my laptop with me. I just have the hard copy, so I cannot access any attachments, including public comments. Were there any public comments on this particular item?
Yes, we noticed the mitigated negative declaration for 30 days and received a number of comments, some related to the environmental document, but most not related to the actual environmental impacts.
Okay.
More concerned about traffic.
Can you forward all of those comments to my office?
We can do that, yeah.
Okay.
And they are posted online as well.
Okay.
But we're happy to forward them.
All right. I'm sorry, I just have the hard copy with me, and so I'd like to have those comments forward to my office, and I'll have my office look into those as well.
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President.
Sophia,
Thank
is
you,
that going
sir.
to be part of the agenda item, the full, the
Hold on a
EIR
second.
comments?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Those
So
will
it would be,
included.
it's going to be part of the agenda item that is scheduled for the next week. So when the agenda goes final tomorrow, it should, those comments should be included.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Councilmember Vang, you win the Brevity Award on this item. Thank you so much. That's great. Councilmember Maxwell.
Just another thought I directed towards my colleague, Councilmember Richardson. Again, I don't know if it's illegal or just bad practice, the spot zoning. It's probably not the best way to move forward on something like this, but maybe if there's something that you're concerned about, a specific use that you'd be interested in creating like an additional buffer zone around, I think there could be conversations on that. I don't know about the method of going to residents and, asking which one of you are going to be okay with apartments in the backyard of your single-family homes. I feel like most people probably say no to that. It's just the mentality a lot of folks have, and I understand that. I grew up most of my life living in an apartment. I have recently become a homeowner, and I don't know how I feel about the philosophy of I got mine, now you're on your own. There was a lot of apartments for folks that can't afford houses that would never come to fruition if we move forward with continuing to do things the way we've always done. And so I'm just sensitive about that. I still want to work us towards a way that we could approve this. And so again, if it's not spot zoning, maybe it's finding additional things that we could create in a buffer around that would give us a little bit more, alleviate some of our concerns. So just something to think about, and I'll think about the same. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. Council Vice President.
Just final point, if we choose not to do this, we're all going to be responsible for tens of millions of dollars of housing funds not coming to Fresno. And as somebody who lives in a single-family home next to a multifamily apartment complex, I know what the urban legends are about multifamily housing, even some spewed by our county sheriff that are completely baseless. But we can't address a housing crisis if we're going to create, NIMBY buffer zones across the city. We either adopt a policy that we believe is good public policy, or we don't. I would just reemphasize, as written by the planning experts, as articulated by our planning expert on council, there is protections here for due process and appeals by the council member of that area. And that council member of any area gets the same amount of money and staffing to engage in that process. So as somebody who has hosted numerous neighborhood meetings in my district on a rezone, yes, I can tell you, if you appeal an item, you host a neighborhood meeting, you'll have hundreds of people there and you hear them out. And that is the process that we have laid out here to continue forward in this path. Spot zoning, piecemealing, complete violation of the law. I think our goal here is to continue to address a housing crisis with good public policy that streamlines what happens in this building while ensures the public's notification and participation before a final decision is made. And I would just encourage folks to either provide amendments or we risk losing tens of millions of dollars and only making the housing crisis even worse in our city.
Thank you, Council Vice President. Just want to clarify because some points were just made. I share the same concern about losing our pro-housing designation and the penalties that can incur upon us. Here's my question. Is ministerial required for that designation or the actual conversions and putting those units on paper?
Ministerial is not required, the units are
Okay.
required.
So if this is passed without the ministerial component, we would not lose our designation. I
Correct.
think it's a really important distinction to make for the public.
Agreed.
Okay. I love the discussion. We've had a couple of really robust discussions in the last, and this is the council vice president's point. You see things, this proves that we actually do things out here and have the discussions out here. There's been some talk about maybe making some changes and pulling back those changes. My view is, and I respect what's been said, I can't approve what I consider ministerial zoning, fundamentally, ministerial rezoning. Fundamentally, I just can't get there. But I can approve so many other components of this that I'd be on board with. It's unfortunate that we just can't find that compromise. Hopefully we will by the time it comes forward, but let's see what happens. Just to be clear though, if the council passes a version of this, and that could happen, but they don't have the requirement like the administration provides reports to us about what's appealable to us, and maybe they remove the buffer. This is more of a city attorney question. Can the mayor veto this item? So if I go to the mayor or the public goes to the mayor, ask him to veto this item if it's passed that way, with those safeguards removed, can the mayor veto it?
Yes.
Okay, maybe we'll have a conversation. It's just a reality. I'd rather do it publicly and say, I'm going to make that request if those safeguards are out there. Yeah. Okay. Any other council members punched up on this item?
Just council member, just real quick, if we mess with any of the buffer elements, we would probably have to go back through the planning commission process.
Okay.
Just a heads up.
Got it.
Council President, if I may just get a point of clarification,
Sure.
I don't think the mayor has veto authority over land use policy. What part of this is
We're directing the
vetoable?
administration though, aren't we?
Let us take a look.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. I know he's not a king, so.
I was just trying to give him more power.
Well, when I asked earlier and I was told he does have veto authority, I'm going to be very concerned if that's not correct.
Okay, let me check.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other council members punched up? Okay. I think that concludes. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We have unscheduled communication. What we're going to do is we're going to come back at 1 second. We're going to open up the unscheduled communication. Anyone wishing to come up, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please come on up to the podium. Come on up, sir. Thank you, sir.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Ledesma. I'm a resident, I think, District Councilmember Perea. I am a rather young father, maybe not so young anymore. I'm 30. But it's hard nowadays for me to think about owning a home, even during the pandemic when all the houses were being bought out by everyone out of Fresno. It was kind of a hard time because at some point your wage just doesn't cut it anymore. So like Councilmember Maxwell said, apartment's a good alternative to it, but the prices are getting high. And I imagine the reason is there's not enough stock. There's not enough housing units in town. I think this is a great policy. I encourage the district or the council to approve it. I know there's concerns about rezoning after buying a home, but as the director said, people bought the home when this use was already in play, so they were aware of it. And I don't want a few residents of Fresno affecting or, I guess, removing the option for everyone else in town. That's just my concern. That's all I have to say about it. I support this, and I hope that the other council members do support it. Thank you again for discussing it. It was a really good conversation. I like learning about it. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Ledesma. It's not always easy coming up here and talking, but you did a great job. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else for unscheduled communication? There being none, that will conclude the business of the day. The meeting is adjourned at 12:02 p.m. Thank you very much.